pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll with Planet. Flight downside of speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
All right. Good morning, space fans. You know the drill this early in the morning. Let me know if you can see the beautiful video coming live from Cape Canaveral. This is on the ITL Causeway over there. I guess technically this is Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Look at this. So many 5x5s in chat, and I didn't ask. John Galloway, NASA Spaceflight here, spooling up some live coverage and commentary for SXM-7. I still have to look at that and read that off the screen to make sure I say it correctly. But we are less than an hour away from the launch of a Falcon 9 rocket from the Space Force Station, the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station down there this morning. And of course, the NASA Spaceflight team will be bringing you live commentary as we do. Let me know, can you hear me okay? And is the video looking correct? It looks like everybody's already jumping in with those 5x5s. So without further ado, let's start introducing the crew, the NASA Spaceflight folks that are going to be here with you today. Starting off out in the field, Chris Gebhardt has rolled out with our remote broadcast camera. And I use that term loosely, but it is a camera that brings us a video feed. Chris, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. It is a camera. It is in a remote location, so it does meet the technical definition. So you, sir, are technically correct.
The very best kind of correct.
Yes.
I was trying to say it at the same time as you there.
Excellent. Yeah.
Good deal. Chris drove over an hour this morning down from his home to get to the Cape and bring us this live feed. So everybody in chat, let us know, did you hear Chris okay? And say thanks to Chris Gebhardt, Assistant Managing Editor for NASAspaceflight.com, who will be out there in the field today. Also, back in the studio, wow, I use that term even more loosely, Thomas Burkhart. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Das. How's everyone doing?
Oh, hanging out. Got this fantastic view of the Falcon 9. Got 45 minutes and change to launch. I'm ready to see this thing go.
Me too.
And also back in the studio, we have Michael Baylor. Michael, check in. Let everybody know that they can hear you.
How's it going, everyone? It looks like we have some great weather for launch today.
Yeah. Thomas, you were talking about the weather. What was our last official weather poll?
Right, so our last official forecast was only 60% odds of favorable weather compared to 90% the other day. However, today, even with a 60% chance, all the weather rules as of last I heard are observed green for today's launch. So everything tracking nominally for launch today, which kind of shows you that, yeah, there are probabilities, but that's how probabilities work. Sometimes, even with a lower chance of good weather, it works out. So it looks like a gorgeous day for launch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, Chris, since you're actually out there, what's your read on the weather? A lot of clouds? Is it windy?
No, it's absolutely gorgeous. There's no wind, which actually makes 73 or 73 degrees not entirely pleasant because it's really humid as well here. But yeah, there's absolutely no wind on the ground. So very much like a couple nights ago when we were here for a Delta IV Heavy. And very different from 2 days ago. No wind. The clouds are really just high altitude cirrus clouds. So not seeing anything cloud-wise that would cause a concern for today. And of course, the booster recovery weather and the upper level wind chances for violating launch constraints are deemed low, but they were as well 2 days ago, and upper level winds almost got them 2 days ago. So we'll wait to see how that pans out, but from a launch weather perspective, we are golden once again.
Excellent. So y'all, as we do on the live streams here, we are live. We do answer questions. If you have a question for us, tag us in chat at NASA Spaceflight. That puts it into a little bit of software that Michael wrote for us so that we can go through the question queue and stuff like that. Again, if you have a question, tag us at NASA Spaceflight, and we will get that into the queue here. Now, keep in mind, there's so many questions. I mean, we'll have thousands of people watching. We can't always get every question. Sometimes we roll multiple questions into one, so 4 different people ask what the weather's like, and then we answer that once. but we will try to answer as many questions as we can. Hey, and the same thing from Super Chats here. Look at this, already in the morning. Already in the morning, Blake Parsons sneaking through with Australian dollars, $38.99. Blake, I appreciate the support. Good to hang out with you this morning. Saying, hey from Australia. Love the streams. Keep them coming. All the streams, right, Blake? Anyways, y'all, the same thing with the super chats. As you do super chats, they go into a queue, some software that Michael wrote, and we don't always get them in real time. We absolutely appreciate them, but whether you're joining as a member, like Jeff Lucas just did, or whether you're doing the super chats, please be patient on those. We don't always read them out in real time, but we do try to read them and answer any questions that are in there as well. Now, the other thing that I want to catch really quickly before we get all going with SXM-7 here, about 42 minutes until launch. News from Boca Chica, Texas. In other SpaceX news, we've got the live feed off the robot there at Boca Chica, and you can see that SN9 is looking a lot better than it did last night. If you were there for that stakeout stream or NSF Live, you know that SN9 was leaning against the side of the high bay. And this morning, actually early this morning, around midnight local time last night there in Boca Chica, they actually started straightening this thing up, which was a big surprise to me. I thought they were going to wait until the morning, and I rolled back the video. The robot was recording locally, even though we weren't streaming it, and we can see that SN9 is looking a lot more up on the pointy end there. So we will continue monitoring that. For now, talking about SXM-7, but I know people are wondering what's going on with SN9 over there, and the robot is on the case. We'll probably have a time-lapse video a little bit later today of that straightening process, so stand by for that. Be watching Twitter. Okay, Chris.
But that's really cool though. Like, I mean, when I got up this morning and I was looking at all of our internal messages and everything, and like the first thing I saw was like they started moving it around midnight, and then the very next message was DOS going, "I'm in the robot's brain. I'm looking for the file." Like,
pull in video,
DOS,
Chris. Pull in
Lord
video.
Commander of the Robot Army.
In fact, during this broadcast, I'm continuing to pull video. I have to pull the video in 15-minute increments, one file at a time off the robot, and it's not efficient, but it saves us a ton of bandwidth. But anyways, how's let's see here, 40 minutes to launch, starting to get questions and stuff like that. Chris, we tried this once already. Do you want to give us a rundown of the mission here?
Yes, indeed. Yes, so I'll talk about the mission from liftoff and then up until payload separation, what the payload's going to do, and then Thomas, I'll hand it over to you if you want to talk about the countdown
Sure.
element we'll be getting into shortly here. So this is a launch for the Sirius XM-7 satellite. So if you are familiar with Sirius XM radio, if you have it in your car, this is a new satellite that is being launched to take over for two older satellites that are servicing the North and South American markets. So SXM-7, once it is in geostationary orbit, will be brought online and checked out and then provide uprated and upgraded service to the Americas. There is a twin to SXM-7, SXM-8, as you might imagine, based on the numbering. It is more or less complete as well and awaiting launch in the first quarter of next year right now, also on a Falcon 9 rocket from here. So after liftoff, Falcon 9 will pitch downrange and head due east out of the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which the sign has changed as well. So it is official across the board. It will head due east on that trajectory to take it to a geostationary transfer orbit. After first and second stage separation, the second stage will ignite to continue taking the payload into orbit. And briefly after that, about a minute after that, the payload fairings will separate. Now, the booster on this mission is being flown for the 7th time. And this is big in some ways. It's not the first booster to fly for the 7th time. That happened a couple of weeks ago. But this is the first mission from a paying customer to launch on a 7th flown rocket. The previous record to that, I believe, Thomas, is a paying customer flying on the 4th flight of a booster, which we saw just a couple of weeks ago with CRS-21 launching. Yes, cool. So this is huge because this has been what SpaceX has been talking about for a while, right? People getting comfortable and paying customers getting comfortable with reuse, the proof that reusing a Falcon 9 is just as safe, if not safer. Some people do like to make the argument that when you can inspect a booster after flight, you gain a lot more confidence in its abilities, so it's safer the more times you fly it. But regardless of if it's safer or exactly the same, this is a huge moment of customer confidence in SpaceX for this rocket. In addition to that, both of the payload fairings have been used before. They were used on the Anasis 2 mission earlier this year, um, in July of this year, and this is the first time a paying customer mission will reuse payload fairings on a Falcon 9. So huge, huge confidence being displayed by the payload customer here in SpaceX. And of course, based on everything that we've seen so far with reused boosters and reused payload fairings, there's no added risk that we've seen from anything of that. Really, sometimes the fleet leader booster is the first one to do a seventh flight or a sixth flight or whatever, can encounter some issues that they're able to fix, but that's why they do the fleet leader boosters, those first flights on that new number of reuse on internal Starlink missions only. So anyway, after the payload fairings separate for launch, both the first stage and the payload fairings will come down into the Atlantic Ocean for recovery. The first stage will land on Just to Read the Instructions, the autonomous spaceport drone ship, which is located about 635 kilometers east of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And then Go Searcher and Go Mystery are both out in the Atlantic about 100 kilometers further downrange. Go Mystery will attempt to catch one half of the payload fairings, and Go Searcher will fish the other one out of the water. Go Mischief, the other fairing catcher ship, is still undergoing repairs after it was damaged a few weeks ago in rough seas. So that's how they're going to get the booster and the payload fairings. It will be a 2-burn mission of the second stage. So after the second stage enters an initial parking orbit, it will then reignite its engine over the equator to change the orbital inclination and push the overall orbit out to what's known as geostationary transfer orbit, at which point it will drop the satellite off. And Thomas, we are at 36 minutes and counting, so why don't you take us through the countdown operations that are set to pick up here in about a minute?
Absolutely. So the first milestone we're going to see is the SpaceX launch director verifying go for launch, which could occur actually any second now. We are waiting for confirmation of that, but at T minus 35 minutes, that will be the beginning of propellant loading into the Falcon 9 vehicle. RP1 kerosene, that rocket grade kerosene, will begin flowing into both stages of Falcon 9, first and second, as well as liquid oxygen oxidizer loading into the first stage. That will begin at T minus 35 minutes. At T minus 16 minutes, liquid oxygen will begin loading into the second stage, the smaller upper stage, which they start loading a little bit later. And they do that to time everything so that all of the tanks are completely loaded and ready to go for launch at just about 2.5 minutes before liftoff. So propellant loading will continue until that point. At T minus 7 minutes, we will see Merlin 1D engine chill down, where the 9 Merlin engines on the Falcon 9 first stage are thermally conditioned for launch. They just flow a little bit of liquid oxygen through the plumbing of the engines just to cool down the components of the engine a little bit so that when the full flow of super cold propellant starts going through them, they're not thermally shocked and there's no damage at engine ignition. So that'll be the milestone at T minus 7 minutes. And then the last milestone before liftoff will be at T minus 1 minute when Falcon 9 goes into startup and the onboard computers take control of the countdown, begin pressurizing the tanks to flight levels, and then engine ignition will be commanded at T minus 3 seconds. That is your standard Falcon 9 countdown, and that is what we will be looking at today. Now, under 35 minutes per pound load should be underway. We have not, with the mission control audio feed is not up yet, so we haven't heard the actual call out for that. But hopefully, we'll be able to see some vapors out and around the rocket to indicate that fueling is in fact underway.
It does look just from my perspective, it does look like the chill down of those propellant lines on the transporter rector side that we can see have done their chill down and
A good
are
sign then.
frosty. A good sign, yes.
And just a reminder that this launch has attempted a launch before, which we touched on earlier. This is the second launch attempt. And we were talking about how boosters that are sort of fleet leaders, this is going to fly for a seventh time, tying SpaceX's record, could encounter some issues. But in fact, this rocket was perfectly okay and ready to go on Friday, the last time they attempted. The problem that caused the scrub was a ground support equipment issue that they had to address. But evidently, that issue has been resolved because they are here and going for another launch attempt today. So hopefully, the rocket is still ready to go, and we'll see a launch in just over half an hour.
All right. We've got a bunch of super chats that came in, so let me grab those really quickly. Rough Rider Show, we appreciate you. And then a little bit of a question there, too. How come the strong pack at 39A is white and the strong pack at 40 is clear ash? Clear ash. Interesting. Is that like a color? Good morning. So, are there multiple strong backs? Are they painted differently? Is there a reason for that? Do y'all know?
I can try and take some of it. Maybe Chris will know more than me. The erector you're looking at right now at pad 40 is different than the one at pad 39A, which is different from the one in Vandenberg at Launch Complex 4 East. So there's actually three different transporter erectors that SpaceX uses. This one at 40 is the oldest of any of them. Pad 40 is the first place they launched Falcon 9s from, and is their oldest active launch pad that SpaceX uses, at least as far as how long SpaceX has owned it. I should specify that. And this transporter erector is a little different than the one at 39A because the one at 39A also has to support the larger Falcon Heavy rocket, whereas at Pad 40 only Falcon 9 launches are going from there. So that's why they look a little bit different. The designs are a little bit different. Of course, the one F40 has seen a way more launches, and therefore I believe that the sort of ash colored is simply the wear and tear of so many different launches, and it's not exactly looking pristine and new anymore. But I think that's only really the major difference. Um, Chris, do you
Yeah,
know
it's
any more details on that?
yeah, in terms of the transporter erectors here at here in Florida, it's basically aesthetics. The one at 39A launches crew, so it looks better. They took a little bit extra care for the aesthetic look of that pad. 40 is their brute force pad. It is the engineering efficient. It doesn't have to look fantastic. It's just does it do its job, and what do we need it to do? And honestly, the one at 40 is kind of designed to be reused more rapidly than the one at 39A, even though they can turn both pads around in about 7 days time. Right now, a little bit less than that, but it's just kind of their brute force one. The one at Vandenberg, however, is the original design, like across the board, where it doesn't perform the throwback maneuver. It can't protect itself like the ones here at Florida do because they don't need to turn the launch pad at Vandenberg around as quickly as they need to turn the Florida pads around.
And a really quick update. We still do not have confirmation that propellant loading started on time. The SpaceX mission control audio feed is not yet up, and nobody else, no other reporters or anything, seems to be able to confirm that it started on time. So as of now, no confirmation that propellant loading truly started at T minus 35 minutes, which is why I have not checked off any milestones on our timelines.
Gotcha. And Chris, Thomas, normally they start putting propellant into the rocket at T minus 35, and we start to see
Right.
some venting. We start to see some lines frost up from this
Yeah, we
perspective.
don't see it right at the beginning because again, it takes once the tanks kind of start getting full is when we actually start seeing those vapors. So we'll wait a couple minutes here and we'll see if we actually do start to see it. Again, we don't know why the audio feed isn't quite up yet. That could be any number of things. But if we get a couple more minutes in and we're still not seeing any vapors, that'll be a sign that they actually have not started propellant load. Today's launch window does extend just about 2 hours, 1 hour and 59 minutes to be exact. So if they did not start propellant load on time, that is not necessarily a scrub for the day. They have lots of time in the window to work out whatever issue might have caused that. But yeah, we're waiting for confirmation on that.
Understood. Thank you for
Um,
that.
yeah, but just to add to that, there have been numerous launches before where, I mean, well, let's be clear. For most missions, SpaceX does not confirm that they have started propellant load. Um, the confirmation that propellant load hasn't started is when SpaceX says we are delaying the launch.
Right. Yeah.
So it's also I don't know. I wouldn't personally read anything into the fact that no one has said anything yet.
Well, we
If
usually get
the
confirmation from the mission control audio
Yeah.
feed and
I
that's
think the only sign that something might be up is that the mission control audio has not been published yet. But again, that could be also a completely different issue. So
except the next sentence I was going to say is that the people at the Kennedy Space Center are watching the countdown clock. So if the countdown clock had
Oh, that's
stopped,
true.
someone should have said it at this point.
Interesting.
Some of the media do have that. That's a good point.
But we do get up to the point where the countdown clock would be not accurate if they hadn't started propellant loading. I mean, it does take a
Correct.
specific amount of time to get that propellant, the locks and the I almost said methane. So much Starship these days. The
Wrong
locks.
rocket.
I mean, I said Falcon 9 was made of stainless steel the other day, and then I was like, wait a second, that's not right. It's too much Starship on the brain. But it does take time to get that fuel and oxidizer into the rocket. But we'll keep watching and see
I
if there's
mean,
any
I'm
official
not
word.
seeing vapors.
Yeah,
I'm getting
Chris, are you
really
seeing? I mean,
tempted to microwave.
sometimes with the naked eye, you can see things a little faster than we pick it up on the camera. Are you see? I know you said you saw a chill down of like the ground equipment, right, Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, you can see it on the video there. Yeah. Um, for the propellant lines, yeah.
All right. Well, we'll
We'll have
keep
to wait.
watching. I mean,
Yep.
it may just mean that they're 15 minutes. They've pushed 15 minutes or something like that. But we will continue to watch and see what's going on. They do have a window this morning, so not the end of the world here if they don't go right at the first T0 that they sort of published. Was that first T0 at the beginning of the window?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I verified before I said that, so
Yeah, they
we'll
were
continue to watch.
targeting 11:22 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is the beginning of a 1 hour and 59-minute window, so that extends to 1:21 p.m. Eastern Time.
Good deal. Let me grab a couple of super chats because they're backing up 16 minutes here. Gedalia Lieberman, welcome to the NASA Spaceflight family. Thank you for joining the support there. Matthew Stefanovsky as well. Thank you, Matthew, for the support. Blake Parsons, hey, you're going to hit your limit. We're going to cut you off, Blake. Thank you so much. Another Australian $14.99. We appreciate the support. Let's see here. Mark DiMartino says, Stream Marathon continues. Thanks, y'all, for your continued dedication and sharing this amazing week with us. Go Team Space. Mark, we appreciate the kind words there and the $10. Jerry Berger is a new member as well. Jerry, welcome to the Space family. Let's see here. Levi asking a quick question. Let's see if we can do this in one sentence. Is weather still a possible issue? Thanks for the coverage. Weather's looking good.
Yeah, so far weather looks good for today. The probability was only 60% go, but right now it looks good.
All right. Plush Vader saying, oh, this is actually a good question. Plush Vader asking, are the 9 engines the same ones as the first flight? So we're
A
saying this is the 7th flight, right?
Right. That is a very good question.
We don't
Almost,
know.
we don't know for sure, and again, this is kind of a very intricate detail that we don't have official info about, so we can't really confirm it. We understand that almost always the engines do stay with the booster that they debuted on, and the engines kind of stay with that booster throughout its lifespan. However, every once in a while, especially if there's a small issue that comes up, or whatever, they can swap out an engine or two between flights or whatever. So we can't confirm that. I would it is most likely that most of them, if not all, are from the also flew on the booster, same first mission, flew with this exact booster. But every once in a while, they do swap out engines for various reasons. So it's not necessarily true that all of them are from that first flight.
Gotcha. Good question. That was something I hadn't thought about because we talk about, or 1058 dot whatever or slash dash whatever, and we never really think, what other parts of that core. Certainly, you don't get into a what is it, grandfather's axe situation where they replace the entire booster, and is it really still the same booster? Because the structure of it, the tanks, all that sort of stuff stays consistent. Maybe they switch out some parts. Certainly, they replace things like valves and stuff like that as needed, if needed. But engines are sort of a middle ground there, and we don't know exactly whether they stay or go. That's such a good question. Thank you, Plush Vader. William Mitchell, $5. Appreciate the support. Hugo Hirling, thank you for joining. Adam Lamar says great coverage as always. Thank you, Adam. Let's see here. Colin Lloyd had a quick question. Hey guys, can you recommend your favorite books for improving my knowledge on the subject area? Great stream as always. Thomas, you got any favorite books?
I have a few different books. It depends on what exactly you want to improve your knowledge on, though. I mean, it also depends on like how much you know already, because I would recommend different books for someone who's already studying this than to someone who's like a beginner trying to get into it. Um, I would say look at, I mean, there's, if you have a specific interest in mind, I mean, if you want to learn about SpaceX specifically, there's an older Elon Musk biography that has a lot of info about like the beginnings of SpaceX, and that kind of gives you some background on that. If you're trying to get into the engineering, there's a lot of really good engineering textbooks on aerospace that I would recommend. The Spacecraft Mission Analysis SMAD textbook is a very good textbook. But yeah, it kind of depends on what exactly you're trying to get into. But there's tons of internet resources to look up, books on yada yada yada, whatever area of aerospace you want to get into. So do some research and highly recommend getting into it. It's a great way to kind of teach yourself some basics of the industry.
I was frantically Googling while you were giving your list. Did you mention rocket propulsion elements?
That is another very good one.
Yes.
Yes, highly recommend.
And
That
really quickly, I did just call this a
Yeah,
hold on a timeline. There's absolutely no way they began propellant loading based on what we're
yeah,
seeing.
we haven't seen any vapors from the rocket yet, and at this point we definitely would have. So good call.
we were 1 minute away from crossing that T minus 20 minutes where we not only see all sorts of vapors cascading off the rocket, but we get that big T minus 20-minute vent and not seeing any indication that that's proceeding, correct?
The T minus 20-minute event is still 3 minutes away.
3 minutes away. Thank you. I knew we were coming up close, but we're not seeing, Chris, you're not seeing anything out there, right?
I mean, I'm not seeing anything out of the ordinary than what I would normally expect from this vantage point, but that's all I can give you is
Normally
my
we
Gotcha.
see
vantage point.
some vapors from the rocket by this point.
Not always, no.
All right.
From this vantage point, not always, no.
Well, let's give it 3 minutes, Chris, and if you see that big T minus
Yeah,
20-minute vent, sing out for us, okay?
we'll do.
Let's see here. Um, oh, Chris, do you have any books on the subject? You probably more shuttle books or anything to recommend?
Actually, I would actually, if you want to like a good idea of like the main people behind our drive for like the commercialization of space, I'd recommend The Rocket Barons by Christian Davenport.
Ooh, that is a good one.
Ah,
Yeah,
good one. Nice. We almost should have like a NASA Spaceflight book list or something like that, where
wouldn't be a bad idea.
yeah, here's a like just put it on the website somewhere and say here's a list of books that we recommend to learn more. That's actually a really good idea. This is why we read chat. I know not everybody does. Um, let's see here. Uh, I'm just trying to read. Here's one Rusty Can saying great coverage as always. Thank you, Rusty Can. There's a couple other questions. Dinah Duckworth, keep up the great job. This is the first thing I look at every morning. Dinah, thank you so much. We appreciate that. It means a lot when people come through and say they appreciate it. They look forward to what we do. I'm going to hold the rest of the super chats here, and we'll see if we can go to some questions. How's that sound?
Sure,
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Thomas, do you have the question queue up?
I do.
All right. Can you grab a couple of them? I'm going to go through the back queue and see if I can add some more questions there to the actual active queue. Okay.
Sure.
All right.
Let's start with this question from K-John Boom, who says, "Is this a reused Falcon today? And if so, how many times has it flown before?" Yes, this is a reflown Falcon 9 first stage today, flying its seventh mission, which would tie the record for SpaceX Falcon 9 reuse. Of course, very notable because this is not an internal, excuse me, an internal mission to SpaceX. It's a paying customer mission, and they are still flying it on a heavily reflown booster, so that is notable. Again, flying its seventh mission today, six missions prior to this.
Yeah,
Here is a
just
Yep, go
sorry,
ahead.
FYI, just FYI. Yeah, so we've crossed the 20-minute mark
Yep,
at this point,
yep.
with no
So
vent. So
yeah, so
yeah,
confirmed that
something's
they did
wrong.
not start on time and that they are delaying. We'll wait. No official word from SpaceX on the status yet, so we'll stand by for that. But in the meantime, we will happily answer some more questions here. Chris, here's a good one for you. Will the Falcon 9 continue flying once Starship becomes operational?
Yes, it most certainly will. Yes, it'll keep flying. Gwen Shotwell has said that they'll keep flying the Falcon 9s and Falcon Heavies as long as customers want them.
And that is especially important for things like the commercial crew program, where they will be flying crew on Crew Dragon. I would highly expect that program to continue flying on Falcon 9 even once Starship begins operational missions, because replacing that capability will require crew rating the new system, which always takes time. So yes, absolutely, Falcon 9 will continue to fly until Starship is proven so well proven that it can take over all of Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy's roles, basically.
Indeed.
Uh,
Indeed,
here is a
and even
Yep,
then,
go ahead.
there appeared to be some things where like people weren't, people aren't completely sold on Starship yet for these types of satellite missions, right? So that's going to be a huge sort of sea change as well for customers to get used to.
Here is a another Falcon 9 reuse question. How many times can a Falcon 9 be used? So is there an upper limit to how many times a single first stage can launch?
Um, Theoretically, there is. So theoretically, each of the Falcon 9s are designed to fly a maximum of 100 times, with deep inspections every with like deep like fine tooth comb inspections every 10 flights. Of course, they're inspected between flights as well, but they get a bit more in-depth look after every 10. But theoretical maximum is 100. Although Gwen Shotwell earlier this year, interestingly enough, said that while that had been the original goal, she doesn't actually envision, based on flight rate and Starship development and the number of customers who wanted new boosters and wanted to pay them for new boosters. She did not envision a Falcon 9 actually reaching 100 flights at this point, but that is what they're designed to do.
And again, as this flight is getting up to the seventh mission on this booster, and that is as far as boosters have gotten, SpaceX will continue to learn more about just what that limit might be for Falcon 9 boosters as they get further and further into flight. So that's something that we're eagerly keeping an eye on.
Yeah.
Hopefully, before too long, we'll have an eighth flight, maybe next year.
True, but I think eagerly what we're what we're more waiting for right now is what's going on.
With this
This is
particular one, yes.
Yeah, because this is also not usual for SpaceX not to say anything.
Right.
Um, that's very weird. And obviously, fueling did not begin on time to launch at the opening of the window. So, very, very interesting what's going on. Meanwhile, SpaceX's stream is still saying they'll be live in 14 minutes for launch,
Right.
which clearly is not happening. So no idea what's happening right now.
Again, y'all, remember, what was it, an hour and 59 minutes on the
Yes.
window
Yes.
here? So not the end of the world. SpaceX has time for this. It's not rendezvousing with the International Space Station. It's not going to a very specific low Earth orbit slot like that, where your windows are instantaneous most of the time, or very short, where you don't have time for a recycle. It's going all the way up to, this one's geostationary, so it gives them a little bit more flexibility in the window because they have to get on this GTO orbit, the geostationary transfer orbit, or yeah, geostationary transfer orbit. That's correct.
Yep.
So they do have some flexibility here. It's not the end of the world. We're going to continue standing by and answering questions and hanging out with y'all. Welcome to Rocket Chasing.
Yes, welcome to rocket chasing. And I should say too, because I know like my family is always like when they push into long windows or they scrub, they're like, oh, that must have been so disappointing. You had to go all the way down there. And my kind of answer to that is, well, I mean, I guess in a way, when you don't launch, like normally it's disappointing. Except my take on it is usually, okay, we weren't ready, so we listened, right? We either
Right.
listened to the rocket or we listened to the ground systems, because what usually gets us is flying when we're not ready and when we don't listen to things, and we don't listen to the systems that we've built. Um, but no, I mean, this is all par for the course. I mean, this is part of the fun. I mean, Thomas, you stood out here with me through some long launch windows that
Yep.
we didn't get off the ground for. It's par for the course, and I don't know. I like it because it kind of makes the days they're never the same in this business.
Sure.
So yeah, it's not that much of a disappointment to us here who are covering them.
Let's see here. We got some super chat questions too, so I'm going to run it through some of those. Question here from Tyler. Thank you so much. Might have missed it on yesterday's stream, but do we know what caused SN9 to lean over? Talking about the SpaceX news over in Boca Chica, which if Das gets my cue, he's going to pull it up on screen really quick.
Gets your cue. I mean, if you say my name out loud, I'll probably be able to do it.
There you go. Starship SN9, the other piece of SpaceX news that we're kind of following while we wait for Falcon 9 to get its act together. But yeah, so we don't know the exact cause. All we know is that the structure that was holding SN9 underneath failed. So the vehicle itself didn't actually collapse or anything. The structure holding it up inside the high bay failed in some way and caused the vehicle to kind of tip over. And SpaceX is working to
SpaceX is now targeting 12:30 p.m. SpaceX is now targeting 12:30 p.m. Eastern for the launch of SXM-7. Time is optimized for launch and recovery. Weather forecast has improved to 80% favorable conditions.
All right.
So there we go, 12:30. Hooray!
All right, so we are just about 1 hour and 20 minutes away then from our new scheduled liftoff time. And again, that's also not at the end of the window. The window extends all the way to 1:21 p.m. Eastern time. So if they need to push any farther, they still have room. But now targeting 12:30 for what it sounds like launch and recovery weather, which is improving. So a good sign that we should still have a launch today.
Indeed, and that's all good. So they pushed because of sorry, Thomas, can you take over? I'm having a tech issue my side.
Nope, you're good. I got you. Let's see here. More questions because we always have questions. Here is a good question. James Brown with the super chat. Has the probability of rapid unscheduled disassemblies dropped since CRS-8 in 2016, and what improvements did they make since that mission? Was CRS-8 2016, or are you talking about CRS? Wait, no, that was CRS. You're right. Let's see here. They have obviously Falcon 9 has proven very reliable. The last actual mission failure they had was the MO6 mission, which of course failed during ground testing prior to launch. Since then, they have not had any mission failures since the debut of the Block 5 version of Falcon 9, and of course, by extension, Falcon Heavy. No launch failures to that point. They have had an engine failure in flight of that one Starlink mission that had an engine failure right before MECO. But again, Falcon 9 is designed to withstand that and still be able to complete the mission. Falcon 9 landings are still sometimes a little problematic on those fleet leading boosters, though they're on I think the longest successful landing streak that they have been. So I would say even that has become even more reliable as Falcon 9 flies more and more often. So yes, absolutely, Falcon 9 and SpaceX overall has become more reliable on their operational launch vehicles over time. They've learned a lot about these systems. They've gained a lot of valuable flight experience, and that's a side effect of flying as often as they do. I mean, today is their 25th flight this year, I believe. Their 25th launch, 24th orbital launch because of the in-flight abort test, which happened this year. But again, that breaks a Falcon SpaceX record as well. So yes, absolutely Falcon 9 and the Falcon fleet becoming more reliable over time, and that is demonstrated by the fact that customers are even willing to fly on these flight-proven boosters, which have flown so often before. Customers are very confident in SpaceX's reliability. And welcome back, Chris.
Yes, and one thing I want to add to that, which because you everything was beautiful there, Thomas, and what I have to add is not actually germane to the Falcon 9 itself, but overall. So you mentioned it's the 25th flight of the Falcon 9. It's the 24th flight out of Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center of the Falcon 9 this year. It'll be the 30th launch after all when you also factor in the 5 Atlas 5s and the 1 Delta IV Heavy that has launched out of the Cape this year as well. But to sort of put into perspective how quickly these Falcon 9 boosters are flying again, with this flight today, this single first stage booster will have flown the same number of flights this year as the entire Atlas V fleet has.
Which is very, very impressive.
Yes.
Absolutely. Of course, we could talk about, well, it's flown even more missions than the entire Delta IV Heavy family, but that's kind of unfair at that point.
Well, that's unfair, yeah.
But talking about workhorse rockets, absolutely. The two kind of major U.S. launch providers, one company has launched more missions with a single first stage than the other has launched with their entire workhorse family. Which, of course, there's so many factors that go into that. I'm not trying to criticize ULA on that end or anything. I'm just
Exactly.
pointing out the a very interesting statistic there.
Let me know when SpaceX gets to Mars.
But that is also a very good point.
Let's talk about every robotic mission that's gone to Mars and who's launched that.
That's true. That is a valid point.
Anyways,
Yes,
we
indeed.
love all rockets. We love all rockets.
All right, I'm going to pull up some more questions. How about this? Do they use helium in Falcon 9 to increase the pressure of the propellant? Could they do that in the header tank on Starship? I believe they are using helium. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. Helium is
Mhm.
used on Falcon 9s
Yes,
to
indeed.
control the pressure in the tanks, right?
Yes,
And
indeed.
could they do that on the Starship? Because we know there was a header tank pressure issue which caused the SN8 landing to fail on their first test flight. Could they use that on the Starship system?
I mean, there's nothing overall that would prevent it on the header tanks. No, for all of them. I think the biggest question though is going to be, with the sort of pressurization system that's used on on Starship, right? Um, and well, actually, you know what? I want to roll that back. I think the biggest thing we have to that they have to figure out first, and I'm sure they have an idea by this point, is exactly why the methane header tank lost pressure.
Hmm.
Because if it lost pressure because of a pressurization issue, like it couldn't keep itself the autogenous pressurization, right, where the vehicle basically pressurizes itself. Um, if it was an issue with that, then certainly you could look at adding COPVs and helium. COPVs stand for composite overwrap pressure vessels.
Yep.
And they are the pressurization tanks, right, that hold the helium and everything like that. You could certainly do that. It does add complexity and it does add risk to your overall system. But so I would argue that they would only be doing that if it was a true pressurization issue, because there are several reasons that a tank could lose pressure, including it being structurally compromised in some way. And remember, the failure seemed to occur from what Elon said with the pressurization in that methane tank when the Raptors relit and it did that really dramatic and quick reorientation, right? Where G forces would be much stronger than what you had just been experiencing. So I really don't want so the answer to that is they could, it would add complexity, but that's not necessarily the fix based on what the failure mechanism was, if that all makes sense.
Completely agree. Thank you, Chris. Let's see here. Here we go. We were talking about this, and Dawes accidentally gave away the wrong answer to this earlier. What fuel does Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy use? And do you think Falcon Heavy will launch next year? So, comparing Falcon 9 with Starship, they both use liquid oxygen as their oxidizer, but they do use different fuels. Falcon 9 uses RP1 kerosene, it's the same fuel that powered the first stage of the Saturn V moon rocket, as well as the fuel of the first stage of the Atlas V and several other rockets around the world. RP1 kerosene for Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. The Starship vehicle uses liquid methane as its fuel. So slight difference there, and that's because liquid methane can be produced on Mars. So obviously that's a key part of that architecture. But RP1 kerosene is a very high performance fuel. It's not super efficient, but it's good for super high thrust, which is very good when you are attempting landing burns and things like that, where you want to burn at the last second. So that is one of the key factors of why SpaceX chose that fuel for the Falcon fleet.
Indeed, and for that methane thing that you were talking about too, Thomas, with Starship, it's yes, it can, methane can readily be produced on Mars, also at many other locations in the solar system. So they
Yes.
really looked at the fuel that Starship would use and tried to optimize it for what their grand plans are, for this to be a solar system transport vehicle, not just to Mars first and foremost, but to really open up every place of the solar system for us.
Here's a question. A question here. How do you keep your crew safe? Great stream as always. I learn more about space at your streams than I learn about math in math class. Well, we're glad you tuned in. Glad you're learning some stuff. As far as keeping our crew safe, we always stream from outside of the hazard areas. We these areas around different launches and events that are maintained to make sure that the public is safe, and that extends to launch media and things like that. We're always a safe distance from these things. We have very good cameras that zoom in nice and close, so you get these beautiful views. But our crew is always a safe distance from these things. Obviously, space flight always the chance of a mishap, and if those happen, they could be dangerous. So we're always making sure we're safe on those regards. Regarding current events, obviously, we're operating with limited crews than we usually do. Chris is the only crew member on the live stream itself down there. Although I believe are you joined by any photographers down there, Chris, today?
Not today, no.
Okay, so Chris actually the only NASA Spaceflight team member at Cape Canaveral for today. So again, we're keeping ourselves safe as far as that goes, doing the minimum crew we need to carry out our coverage, and of course keeping distance with everyone else. So we're always making sure that we're operating as safe as possible, while continuing to bring you these coverage so that everyone who wants to watch these events can also stay home and stay safe, by watching our webcast coverage instead.
Exactly. And Thomas, when you and I have been down here together, we've always, worn masks and stayed away
Yep.
from each other, and everything like that. And when it does come down to days where it's only one of us out here, like I've got the live stream rig, which you're looking at the live picture of Slick 40 from right now, and I also have one of our photographers, Nathan Barker's camera here, and he provided all the settings and the framing and everything. So, we do what we can in this current environment to still bring you all the coverage that's possible while working within all those safety guidelines and rules.
Couple of new memberships and super chats came through. Phila Kid, does that stand for Philadelphia Kid? Because if so, what's up? I'm in Philly too. Good, thanks for the membership. Chris the Gardener with a new membership. Thank you so much for joining on. And Dave with the $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. We got some new book recommendations coming in. This is another good one. The book titled Ignition is a very good one. Highly recommend. Thanks for throwing
Oh
that in
yeah,
the chat.
that's a good one.
That is a good one. Yeah.
Das, do you have the question queue up?
I do, yes.
The next one is saying that you nailed pronouncing my name, but I don't think I did because I
Oh.
don't even know how to begin pronouncing this name. I think it must be directed towards you.
No, it's Gedalia Lieberman again. You nailed pronouncing my name. Many people just say my last name because my first is too hard. Glad to be a member. Thank you so much there. We appreciate the kind words. And, I hope I didn't mess it up the second time I said it. You put me on the spot. I just got to get past it once, and in the future, I'll go with something else. No, thank you so much for the support.
And another question here, how does Falcon 9 have enough fuel to land? So Falcon 9, in their mission designs, they have to reserve a little bit of fuel in that first stage at MECO. Normally, during a expendable rocket launch, the first stage burns almost all of its fuel, burns until they're out of fuel and or oxidizer. And then the stage drops down and is destroyed by aerodynamic forces or by an impact with the ocean, and is not recovered. The Falcon 9 calculates its main engine shutdown time as to when they will have enough fuel left for landing. So they simply shut down the first stage a little bit earlier in flight before they burn all of its fuel, and then Falcon 9 has that fuel left for landing. And that's just calculated into their flight trajectory.
All right, and Thomas, I just put some more questions into the queue there for you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Let's see. Skunked with the question, were they able to upright Starship SN9? They are working on it. It is more upright than it was before. Not completely upright yet, but they're still working on it. And they're right on cue. Das's robot down in Boca Chica getting us a view there. So you can see it's a little more upright than it was last night. So they're continuing to work on it, but not fully rescued yet, and we still don't know the full extent of the damage from that. There's certainly a chance that Starship SN9 will not fly again if the damage is severe, but again, we have to wait and see exactly what the damage is. But they are continuing to work on that, yes.
And it could also be possible, Thomas, too, that, right, like, that SN9 is salvageable, but it might just take less time to get SN10 out to the pad first.
Also
and
very...
they might fly 10 first and then 9. Anything's sort of open on the table right now until they can actually get a look at the inside damage that's been done with the tip.
Excellent, absolutely. I'm gonna go through some super chats really quick. Sandy, my eyes are tired from lack of sleep with full week of spaceflight live streams. Great coverage, guys, as always. Here, take part of my savings, maybe to buy a cosmic perspective camera or many robots. Das,
Oh,
more money
nice.
for the robot account. Thank you so
We
much, and we enjoy doing all of these back-to-back live streams. I think tomorrow, do we have anything to stream tomorrow? Is tomorrow going to be the first day without an NSF live stream in like
and
2 weeks?
yeah.
It,
Um
today's the 10th consecutive day of a live stream, I think. So
That doesn't surprise me.
unless something
Maybe we all
happens,
get to sleep tomorrow.
but
We'll
Michael,
have
unless I was gonna say unless something happens in Boca Chica, probably, but you just
yeah.
never know with Boca Chica.
That's true. Someone in our back channel just said, "Don't jinx it. Something will come up." But hey, if something's worth showing live,
I mean,
we'll be
okay.
live for it. So
Here's another probable. I shouldn't say probable, but it's definitely within the realm of reason. If today's launch were to scrub, the backup date is tomorrow. So that could
don't
be
say
something.
that.
Yeah.
Oh no.
No,
Yeah, no,
positive
actually,
thoughts.
I just thought of that. I was like, well, tomorrow I could be laying on the causeway exactly as I'm doing now, just waiting it out.
Jeez. All right. Well, stay tuned to see if we go live yet again tomorrow. Although I know we'll always have content to share tomorrow because we have those daily videos from Boca Chica.
Yeah.
So at the very least, you will have some content from NASA
Well,
Spaceflight regarding some space news.
oh yes, and you will at the very least have an article on tomorrow because overnight, just after or just before 1
Oh,
a.m. Eastern, just before 6 a.m. UTC today, Russia is planning to launch the Angara 5 on its second of 2 test flights. And we have a big article on that because that's a huge, huge step in the right direction for certifying Angara 5 in the overall Angara system for operational flights. So that's a huge one that's happening tomorrow. So you'll at least have text-based commentary from us in the form
As
of a news article.
And also, tomorrow is the next scheduled launch attempt for Astra trying to reach orbit for the
Indeed.
first time, their Rocket 3.2 mission. So that's coming up tomorrow too. So plenty of stuff to follow. Even if it's not live on the YouTube channel, check out NASAspaceflight.com because there'll be plenty of news coverage over there.
You know what's really
And if,
funny is it's like
yeah,
if everything goes today, it's like we move from the mid-latitudes of Earth to the polar latitudes of Earth for
yes,
tomorrow
2
for
launches from
Angara
the
from
polar areas
SpaceX.
of Earth.
Yes.
Absolutely. Some more super chats here. Moldy Space Industries always coming in here for the NSF Book Club and the Thomas Fan Club. Thank you so much. Appreciate
Ooh,
it.
Thomas, you've got competition now.
I know now I gotta compete with a book club. That is something I never thought I'd say. Thank you so much. Raul Rodriguez with a super chat. Thanks so much. Here we go. Alejandro. Oh, here's a good question. Talking about some Starship news as we're also covering here. Well, if SN9 or SN10, whichever one flies next, succeeds, will they be reused? Thanks for your coverage. Come to think of it, Starhopper is the only Starship test vehicle to fly multiple test flights.
Mm-hmm.
The SN5 and SN6 only flew once each, and of course SN8 will obviously not fly again. So could they be reused? I suppose it's possible. Of course, it depends on if the flight is successful in the first place. Have to land it in one piece first.
They are doing sorry. They are doing conditioning venting
Yep, we
on the
see it.
Falcon 9 right now. So that's a
there
good
we go.
sign. Yep.
You can see the ground equipment starting to come to life here again. Falcon 9 fueling itself will not have started yet. That will only occur at T-minus 35 minutes. But yes, so a good sign that we are tracking on time for launch now. But yeah, I suppose it's possible. I think I wouldn't expect it. I would more expect them to do a really thorough kind of tear it apart inspection of the flight afterwards.
Yeah.
Although they do get to do that to some extent. Of course, SNA kind of tore itself apart for them, but they do plenty of inspections on that hardware. They could do that again with whatever the next vehicle is, even if it does land in one piece and they nail that landing. But it's also possible that they could fly it again. We'll see. It also depends on what exactly they want to fly next. If they want to continue flying that sort of 12.5 kilometer flight profile, or if they'd like to go to higher altitudes or fly some different profiles, they could need a vehicle with slightly different hardware installed on it or whatever. So we'll have to wait and see what their plans are going forward. Good question.
Yeah. You know what the thing I'm most looking forward to actually is when they start to refly them because I think one of the things we'll see at first is like, a couple days or a week or so between flights. But the ultimate goal of Starship is for these things to be able to fly at least 3 times every single day.
Hmm.
So that's the test program I'm really waiting for, is when they launch one of these at 8 o'clock in the morning, get it back, pick it up, put it back on the launch stand and fuel it again and launch it at noon, get it back, and then fuel it up and launch it again at 5. Like, that's what I'm waiting for personally. Because
Absolutely.
that's a huge part of what I imagine their test campaign will ultimately arrive at, right? If you're serious about flying a system that many times, or really if you're serious just about Starship in general, that level of cadence speaks to the level of technological maturity, specifically in those engines, which on Starship, you need those engines to ignite for that landing burn. No ifs, ands, or buts, especially if you're going to put people on it. And a good way to do that is to demonstrate the rapid fire nature and the rapid flight nature of the system overall and its safety, just like airplanes.
Absolutely. And another question here while we're on the topic of Starship here. Can Starship without a booster, well, first of all, I say Wings to Space with the super chat. Thank you so much. Can Starship without a booster reach the height and velocity needed to test the heat shield? A plus on the extensive effort to cover SNA. Well, thank you so much. As Starship, and this is based on some public comments from Elon, Starship can technically get all the way to orbit on its own. Unfortunately, once it gets there, it'll have no fuel left to come back and land, and it might not even have the margins to have the recovery hardware, such as a heat shield and things like that, on it. So they're never going to do that practically. But we do know that Starship could get that far. So if we're talking about doing a heat shield test, a suborbital heat shield test is absolutely something they could do. Although to really test it to the extent of returning from orbital velocity, they would need the booster. So not sure they would do any heat shield testing if they can't go all the way to the orbital velocity that they need to test it at. But it is possible that they could do some preliminary testing on a suborbital mission. Again, we want to wait and stay tuned for what SpaceX's Starship testing plans are going forward, to see what kind of cool testing they're going to do next. But it is possible that they could. I would speculate that they'll wait to get the booster ready, though. Noxnard with a new membership. Thank you so much for joining up. And Morth with a new membership. Thanks for joining on and appreciate the support. Sync Life, just want to say thank you for all the streams and efforts explaining every detail. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for tuning in. We like to add some extra commentary that you might not necessarily get elsewhere, try and do some teaching, try and answer some questions and things like that. So we're glad you're enjoying that. We appreciate it. Zimir with a new membership as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of your support. This is very much appreciated. Here's a question to something that you just saw, Chris. Durai asking, what is conditioning venting? What are the other things that Falcon 9 goes through after
Yes.
going vertical before fueling?
Yes, so this is a great question. So the biggest thing that we mean by conditioning is just like Thomas was saying earlier, where when you get to the T-7 minute mark in the countdown, they start letting a little bit of that densified super cold liquid oxygen come down into the engines to start thermally conditioning them for ignition and flight. You have to do the same thing to the ground support equipment propellant lines as well. You can't just all of a sudden throw the switch and have super cold, hundreds of degrees below Fahrenheit and centigrade, liquid oxygen and liquid kerosene flowing through your propellant systems and your pipes on the ground. So you have to start letting a little bit of them trickle into the propellant lines to cool them down, because they contract so much. So if you just let a sudden flow of super cold propellant through those ground support lines, they would crack and they would break, just the same way that the engines on board the Falcon 9 would have issues if you just did a cryo shock like that. Cryoshock, a rapid reduction in temperature in this regard. So they have to configure those. Some other things that the Falcon 9 undergoes after it goes vertical for flight is the loading of helium and nitrogen. So helium is loaded into the composite overwrap pressure vessels, or COPVs, which are then used to pressurize the propellant tanks on Falcon 9. And then nitrogen is used as well as an inerting substance, because helium and nitrogen are very, very stable in that regard. So Falcon 9 receives its load of those particular, they're not propellants, but we call them commodities in this case. So it receives those commodities. It undergoes leak checks to make sure that all of the propellant connections between the transporter erector, which rolls out to the launch pad, and the ground support propellant lines are sealed and good for flight, so that they won't leak when you start fueling. And then they also do data and electrical checkouts, and overall vehicle health checkouts, just to make sure everything is okay. And what's cool too, they also have cameras inside of the propellant tanks. So they're also doing visual inspections inside of the propellant tanks and inside of the payload fairing as well after it goes vertical. Great question. Great question.
Absolutely, thank you. Flurgy with the super chat as well. Thank you so much for your support. And Nick with a question that we've gotten before and we love talking about. Thank you for the super chat. Will Starship ever dock to the International Space Station? You know, sometimes we joke that if that
Yeah.
were to occur, the International Space Station is the one doing the docking because Starship has bigger internal volume than the ISS. But SpaceX has said that they want Starship to be able to support space station logistics. So it is theoretically possible that that could occur. It would look ridiculous, although to be fair, the shuttle docking to the station also looked a little ridiculous as far as size goes. But I don't know.
Especially in the early days.
Yeah, it goes. Yeah, as it got bigger, it looked a little less ridiculous. But Chris, do you think that like what is your prediction if that will happen or not?
Ah, I would never rule anything out,
Right.
because the huge amount of cargo volume that Starship has could be massively useful to the International Space Station, especially as Axiom grows the commercial edition, which is going on the US, European, Japanese, and Canadian side of the station. So I would never say never. It's definitely something SpaceX and NASA have kind of notionally talked about, because there's a render of it, of what this would actually look like. And Elon has mentioned it as a possible use. What I think it's really going to come down to ultimately is the need. Does the station need something that big, to resupply it, and to service it in that way? Now, the other big thing with Starship, right, is if we ever needed to haul gigantic external things, up to the station, this is now also a possibility, right? We've been constrained on external cargo volume, for the International Space Station, primarily because we only have the automated the HTV-2 vehicle from Japan and SpaceX's trunk that can take external elements to the station. So if you could have a payload version of Starship that's equipped with a docking thing, so it could still dock to the space station and then open up its payload bay. And if you've got clearances, and if Canadarm2 could reach in there, you could really do something with that, with exterior cargo volume. But again, we'll have to wait and see. There are many potential uses. It's not the most practical thing in the world, but practical, and not being the most practical doesn't mean it won't happen. So possibility, but I think there are definitely bigger fish for Starship to fry first, including Artemis and Mars, before they would seriously look at an ISS variant, especially with the Dragon capsules they've got now.
Very good. And we've got about 53 minutes until the scheduled liftoff time, so we're answering a bunch of questions before we get into the business end of the countdown. Falcon 9 here, slated to launch the Sirius XM-7 communication satellite at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's dive into some more questions here. Here's a good one, Chris. How does SpaceX decide where to launch from between the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station? They're right next to each other in Florida, so based on what orbits they can reach, not much changes. So how do they decide which pad to use? Pad 40 that we're looking at right now, or pad 39A?
Yeah, so most of the time they'll just simply move back and forth between the two of them. One mission will go from 39A, and then the next one will go from 40, and they'll flip flop back and forth there, if they need it. If the cadence is not strong enough to support that, then they'll usually default to 40. And then the big driving factor with 39A is, the NASA missions. So the crew missions and the cargo missions go from 39A. And those usually have their launch dates set months and months and months in advance. So, for example, the Crew 2 mission is slated to launch on the 30th of March, 2021. So that's already in the book. So if they wind up with missions in so when they wind up and they go to plan their manifest for March, let's say, they're going to reserve 39A for the 2 weeks prior, at least to the 2 weeks prior to Crew 1. So nothing's going to go from that pad at least 2 weeks before the crew flight because they absolutely need that pad. They don't have a backup for crew
And why
pads.
is that? Why do crew missions have to go from 39A?
Yeah, great. That's a great question. Because that is where the gigantic service tower and crew access arm are located, and they did not build one of those at 40 because they only intended to launch crew from 39A, which itself was a huge bonus for SpaceX because most of that infrastructure was already there. They just had to add a level to the fixed service structure, move the escape system up to that level, and then build their own arm and attach it. But other than that, the facilities were already there, so they didn't have to expend a lot of money building something from scratch. They could just modify it for use of the Falcon 9, which, to be fair, is pretty much what 39A's existence and life has all been about. The tower that is at 39A right now serviced the shuttle program as well, and prior to that, they were the mobile launch towers for the Apollo Saturn V program. So just use what you've already got and modify it for the Falcon 9. So, but to the bigger question, that's how they generally decide between 39A and 40. So, for example, we've got this one on the pad right now, and in 4 or 5 days, there's theoretically the NRL 108 mission on a Falcon 9 that will go from 39A, and then a week later, the Turksat 5A mission from 40 again.
So there we go. Thank you so much for the question. Here is another one regarding this particular mission. Love listening to your streams. Will Falcon 9 land after this unusual flight plan to geostationary transfer orbit? So this actually isn't that unusual. The reason it seems unusual is because it's been a while since SpaceX has actually launched one of these geostationary comsats, but it used to be a very big part of their manifest, and it's a big part of the commercial launch market. SpaceX has flown missions to geostationary many times before. They very much know how to do it, and they will absolutely be attempting a landing today. The drone ship is stationed due east of Cape Canaveral. How far is just read the instructions downrange again, Chris?
Yeah, so just read the instructions is 635 kilometers downrange, which actually is basically equal to the distance they put the drone ship for Starlink missions to low Earth orbit.
There we go. But yes, Falcon I will attempt a landing, and as they usually do for geostationary missions, there will be a drone ship landing for today. Here is another question here. A related question. How do they know where to put the drone ships? So the drone ship is stationed where, and it depends on exactly what kind of mission they're launching. For a mission to geostationary transfer orbit, they do want to put as much energy into the payload as possible, get it to as close to its operational orbit as they can, so that the satellite can use as little as its propellant to finish entering its operational orbit and therefore last on orbit a little longer, having extra propellant to do maneuvers and things like that. So they do try to put as much energy into the spacecraft as possible, which means that the drone ship will go pretty much as far downrange as Falcon 9 can go while still having propellant for landing. Once Falcon 9 shuts down and separates from the upper stage, it follows what's known as a ballistic trajectory, just allows its momentum to carry it the rest of the way downrange. And wherever that kind of stage would fall normally is where they station that drone ship, and the Falcon 9 at the last second conducts the landing burn. On some missions where they have a little bit of, they're going to a lower orbit or carrying a less heavy payload, the drone ship might be a little closer to the launch site because Falcon 9 can reserve a little bit of extra fuel to give it a little more fuel margin and therefore land a little closer to land, to have some little less stress on the vehicle because they don't need as much energy into the payload. Sometimes if they're going to a really low orbit or with a really light payload or both, they don't even need the drone ship, and Falcon 9 can actually save enough fuel to conduct a boost back burn and actually fly itself back to Cape Canaveral and land at landing zone 1. So it depends on the exact mission. It also depends on, of course, what direction the mission is going to. If it's going to geostationary orbit, the Falcon 9 has to fly due east from Cape Canaveral to get as much velocity as possible because geostationary orbits have to be at a 0 degree inclination. So they don't want to launch into a inclined orbit flying northeast like they sometimes do. So that obviously affects things as well. But it is the point but the point underneath the launch trajectory where that first stage will be falling down is where they put that drone ship for landing. Good question. Chris, we have
Yes.
a couple questions here. What are the towers around the launch site, and what are the
Oh,
wires
yes.
hanging down from them for?
Yes, so you would never guess it by today's weather, but Florida is one of the lightning capitals of the world. Not the lightning, but one of the lightning capitals of the world. We have really, really intense afternoon thunderstorms here in the summertime and in wintertime when uh, frontal systems come through. They can have some pretty severe embedded weather in them as well. So the four towers that you see standing just slightly taller than the Falcon 9 there are the four lightning protection towers at Slick 40, Pad 40, and the wires that you see coming down from them are the guide wires and the energy channeling wires. So when a lightning storm passes overhead, if there's a rocket on the pad, or even if there's not a rocket on the pad, because the lightning protection systems are also designed to protect all of the pad systems. Because remember, we have quite a bit of kerosene and oxygen and hydrogen so let me back up. We have quite a bit of oxygen sitting at every single launch pad, but oxygen is not flammable in that regard. But also sitting at every single launch pad is either a bunch of kerosene or a bunch of hydrogen, depending on what fuel, what propellant the particular rocket uses. So we need to protect that as well as all the electronics and all the equipment that are at the pads as well. So the lightning towers are there so that if a lightning strike is naturally triggered near the pad's vicinity, the lightning will be attracted to the giant conductor rods, the giant lightning rods at the top of that, strike them, and then have all of that electrical energy harmlessly transferred down away from the rocket or the ground systems and into the ground. So that is what they are there for. They have 100% been used before and have 100% saved some vehicles on the launch pad. Probably one of the more famous lightning strikes that occurred on the ground was in the shuttle program era, where there were a couple of flights in the latter part of the program where the lightning rod at 39A was struck within a day of liftoff. And they were able to go in and look at the vehicle and say, yep, there was absolutely no damage or no electrical hiccups whatsoever because the lightning protection system worked perfectly.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So sticking with the topic of things we're seeing at the launch pad, what is the building between us and Falcon 9 that we're seeing on
Oh.
our camera view right now?
Yes, yes. So that is actually the horizontal integration facility at Pad 40. So it is right there at the launch pad, and that is what you are looking at. So those two doors that you're seeing there are where they can roll first stages and second and payloads inside, and as well as second stages into there. That is a smaller horizontal integration facility than the one at 39A. So they can really only accommodate one vehicle at a time inside the integration facility at 40. So they actually use the larger horizontal integration facility at 39A to do some of the final refurbishment and flight prep work before then moving the boosters from 39A over to 40 when they're needed. So, like today, after this mission launches, either a couple of hours after it or tomorrow, they'll haul the booster for the Turksat mission into there and start prepping it and getting the next mission ready to go from 40 while the NRO flight continues to process at 39A. Ah,
Ex
that's actually a good point. That is another sorry, there was a question earlier about how do they decide which launch pad. That's also part of it because sometimes the horizontal integration facility at 39A gets so jam-packed when you have a Dragon or sometimes 2 Dragons, in there at the same time with all of the boosters, and of course, they're prepping for a Falcon Heavy, in the first half of next year. as well. So sometimes that also has a factor on which launch pad you go from, because sometimes it's more efficient to just use the horizontal integration facility at 39A for booster processing for missions to go from 40, because you'd have to clear some of those boosters out in order to roll the transporter erector into the integration facility at 39A to get a mission prepped there. So that the cadence of where the boosters are even stored before they go to their specific launch pad is also a factor in determining which launch pad here from Florida missions go from. See,
Excellent.
sometimes you ask a completely different question and it jogs something in memory of like, oh yeah, that's another reason. Yeah.
All good. Thank you so much. And I'm going to take this question to give us a chance to stop for some station identification because this person asked, do we actually work for NASA?
Nice.
Thanks for the coverage. Doing great so far. We do not work for NASA. Our website is named after NASA, but we are a private news organization called NASAspaceflight.com, covering news not just here in the United States, but around the world as well, covering spaceflight news around the world. And we are here bringing you live coverage as a media organization for this SpaceX Falcon 9 mission. But we do not work for NASA. We are not officially affiliated or anything like that.
Seems like a good opportunity to go around the horn and put some
Sure.
names to voices as well.
Well, you just heard the voice quickly of Das, host and producer for NASAspaceflight.com, John Galloway.
How's it going?
You're also hearing the voice of Chris Gebhardt, the assistant managing editor for NASAspaceflight.com. He is the one at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station today, crewing the camera and offering some commentary as well. We've also got myself, Thomas Burkhart, a editor and reporter for NASA Spaceflight, here in my studio, aka my desk at home. Offering some commentary for as well, and then back in another studio, Michael Baylor, the another live stream producer for NASA Spaceflight and reporter, offering some of the back end technical help and commentary as well from him. So that is the team covering SXM-7 today for NASA Spaceflight.
Yeah, good
And we
deal. And real
also
quick, I think it's been a second since we've said what SXM stands for. So much
Uh,
people just joining us.
Yeah, so it's short for Sirius XM-7. If you're familiar with Sirius XM satellite radio, well, those radio signals have to come from a satellite, as the name implies, and this is one of the newest satellites for that system of spacecraft communication satellite launching on Falcon 9 today.
And it will be going to a geostationary orbit over at 0 degrees latitude and 84 degrees west
Yes.
longitude. So it will be placed over the Americas. So this particular one will actually replace two older satellites in the overall Sirius XM constellation. The two satellites that it is replacing are not Sirius XM satellites. Actually, they were back before the two companies merged together. So this one is their first joint satellite that's going up together, but is the seventh overall of the constellation, which is why it gets the number 7, even though it's the first SXM satellite to be built since as a merged entity there. So it will replace 2, and it itself has a twin that was also ordered and built at the same time. That is known as SXM-8. And it will launch in the first quarter, or is currently scheduled to launch in the first quarter of 2021, also on a Falcon 9. And it will likewise go up and replace 2 of the aging satellites in the Sirius XM constellation.
There you go. Some more questions here, and actually we've got a super chat question that we should try and answer. Thank you so much everyone for your support. If Starship can SSTO, which we've mentioned they kind of technically barely can, but not really practically, would they ever do it for the lunar version and just refill in orbit since it's just a ferry for the moon?
It's a great question. In that
I
regard,
got it. Here.
Oh.
No, Chris, you talk. I got cameras.
Oh, cameras. Okay. Well, I was like, well, are you going to show us the lunar starship?
Well, that's
would've been
exactly
great.
what's
Yes,
happening.
you are. Yeah. There was a moment where I tried
break.
forgotten the
Quick
painted-
update. SpaceX has just confirmed that they are go for propellant loading. So the launch
Good.
director has pulled the team, and we're go for propellant load to start in about 3 minutes. Sorry, continue.
Excellent. No. Thank you for that. That's important. Yeah, so in this case, it would actually be better to launch the lunar version on the Super Heavy booster. because at that point you won't need to use your entire supply of liquid oxygen and liquid methane inside the vehicle, which you need to perform the orbit changing maneuvers to then get Starship into the proper near rectilinear halo orbit, which is a mouthful to say, but is the technical term for the orbit around the moon where the lunar gateway and where the lunar landers will be stationed for the Orion capsules and crews to go up and meet them. So to do all of that, it's actually more efficient to just go with a load of liquid oxygen and liquid methane. Sorry, I'll let the truck pass. It's actually more efficient to just load it up all together on the ground and launch it that way, and then use cryogenic propellant management on in space to manage how much of your propellant is boiling off. In that regard, and it's actually something cryogenic management is actually something all of the lunar landing teams will have to address in some way with the liquid fueled systems that all of the landers use. So not something that's specific just to SpaceX or with Starship. Now the benefit to Starship though is that it will not use that oxygen and methane because it won't use the Raptors to actually touch down on the moon. It will use the Raptors to do the big orbit changing maneuvers, but then the actual landing will be carried out by thrusters that are situated much farther up the vehicle, and that is to allow Starship to land on the lunar surface without kicking up the lunar regolith, which is the fine powdery surface material that's on the moon. Moon sand, basically, if
There
you
you go.
if you want to go with a more accessible term than regolith.
And Chris, I brought up the live feed from Boca Chica where we had that HLS nose cone
Yes.
that you can see. Speaking of lunar starships, that is a live view from Boca Chica of the mock-up, right? This is something that they've got the logo painted on the side of. They painted it white. We think that they're going to do some interior design, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and because this is part of it, right? Like part of the overall human lunar landing system designs are that mock-ups have to be created for crew training and things like that. And we've already seen Blue Origin deliver the mock-up of the Ascent module to an indoor facility at NASA. But how do you bring an entire nose cone of a Starship into an indoor facility at NASA? The thing's huge. So yeah, so we are getting the opportunity to see publicly what normally goes on behind some closed doors with the building of the mock-ups, the original mock-ups, to try to figure out what's the best design. So a lot of times when you see those T-38s from NASA, the jet that they use to transport NASA personnel sometimes, and you see them sometimes always going back and forth between Houston and Boca Chica, part of what they're doing is that collaboration with SpaceX on not just the overall human lunar landing system design, and human lunar landing system is what HLS stands for in this regard, but it's also bringing astronauts down to look at what SpaceX is thinking about in terms of the internal design, and having astronauts say, yeah, that's good, or actually, what if we did this instead, or have you considered this, right? Utilizing the people who actually have lived in spacecraft before to give you input on your design is really, really critical. So that's a lot of what we're seeing happening out here in the open that usually happens behind closed doors at the Johnson Space Center in those mock-ups and trainers.
Yeah. Good deal.
And-
Because there was an update or something, I think.
Yeah, we heard a call out that propellant loading has begun.
So propellant
There we
loading
go.
underway. RP-1 kerosene and liquid oxygen both flowing into Falcon 9's first stage, and RP-1 kerosene also flowing into the upper stage. Again, liquid oxygen loading for the second stage won't begin until T-minus 16 minutes, which is the next milestone in the countdown. So we should start to see some vapors in and around the rocket to indicate that the air around Falcon 9 is condensing due to the super cold propellants being loaded in. And then, of course, at T-minus 20 minutes, we'll see that big vent from the ground, from the transporter erector, to show that fueling is proceeding on time. So everything proceeding nominally at this time for a liftoff at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
All right. Hey, I saw a
And
question,
yeah,
just scroll through chat really quickly while we were going, and it was concerning, oh, why do you have to make up such a complicated name for dirt? Like, why is it called regolith? Why don't they just call it dirt? My understanding of the difference is that dirt, like traditional dirt, has an organic component, like a biological component, because you got dead plants and stuff mixed into it and that sort of thing. But on the moon and these other places, when we're talking about Mars, when we're talking about the moon, it's missing that biological component, right? As far as we know. And so that's my understanding. The difference between regolith and dirt. Dirt is a specific sort of thing that has some other ingredients that we just don't find in those other places. Is my understanding on that correct, y'all? That's what I've always heard.
You know what? I don't know if I've ever tried to differentiate dirt from regolith, but that sounds like a good explanation, so I'll just go with what you said.
So yeah, so it's a yes, I mean the technical definition of it, right? It's basically like a top layer of loose deposits, mainly consisting of dust and broken rocks and other related materials. It's actually something that's found on Earth as well. It's not just found on barren places like the moon or asteroids. It's also on Mars as well, and all the other terrestrial planets and moons. So it is something different than dirt, exactly what you were saying, Das. It's basically relating to the uniformity of a substance. So it's just a homogeneous, it's made of like the same type of stuff, whereas dirt would be like a conglomeration of a whole bunch of different things, like you were saying, Das.
Gotcha. I think I'm going to tweet at Dr. Metzger and see if he can give us the exact definition there.
That would be awesome. Yes.
I'll do that.
Really quick, we've got a question here in chat, and before we get into the real business end of the countdown, I want to take an opportunity to address this. Dougal asked if there is any sign of, quote, security. Chris, I think you know what I'm
Where is
talking
he?
about.
Where is he? Yes. Oh, he's gone. Okay,
Oh, he's gone. Dang
there
it.
was like a giant 9-foot alligator here
Oh,
when we got here, but he's long gone. Yeah, he moved on. The buffet was not appetizing.
We literally Chris connected his camera feed when we were setting up the stream, and when the camera feed came through, he was focused on an alligator that was in front of him. KSC security hiding from Chris though, I'd say on site. But
Yeah.
they're always out and about.
Yeah, the aerial security is here with the pelicans, but
Ah,
yeah.
okay. Excellent. Back into some more tech-related questions, perhaps. We've got one here. Actually, we've got a couple questions here about SpaceX Falcon Heavy. One asking when the next Falcon Heavy launch is, and the other asking why those launches are so rare. The next Falcon Heavy
Ah.
launch is scheduled for next spring. It is a classified mission for the U.S. Space Force, USSF-44, and that'll be on a Falcon Heavy from Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. I believe no earlier than March? Or is it May?
May now,
Oh,
I think.
it's May now. It's the
May?
first
Okay,
half
I
of the
know it's
year,
been slipping a
yeah.
little bit. But that is the next Falcon Heavy mission. So I'm going to extend the second part of this question to Chris. Why are Falcon Heavy
Mhm.
missions so rare, or at least rare compared to Falcon 9 flights? I mean, Falcon Heavy hasn't launched at all this year.
Yeah. So, it comes down to the type of missions that you need a vehicle like Falcon Heavy for. It's the same reason that the Delta IV Heavy does not have a very high flight rate either. You end up using the heavy configurations of these vehicles like Falcon 9 when you either have massive payloads that your regular rocket just literally can't do. Even if you use an expendable Falcon 9, if the mass of the payload was exceeded what the Falcon 9 could do, then you'd need a Falcon Heavy. There are very few payloads that actually utilize that, right? Another reason to use the Falcon Heavy might be for interplanetary missions, right, which are few and far between right now. But honestly, the biggest reason you would use these vehicles is when you need to get them to places in Earth orbit very quickly. So just like we saw a couple nights ago, one of the things that a Falcon Heavy can do is it can perform direct geostationary insertion missions. So this flight today is using a geostationary transfer orbit, which means the Falcon 9 will drop the satellite off in an orbit where the apogee, or point farthest from Earth, is at geostationary orbit level, which is 35,786 kilometers above Earth's sea level. But the perigee, the closest point to Earth in that orbit, will be very close, like 300, 400, 500 kilometers, right? And the satellites then use their onboard propellant to raise that orbit up to true geostationary orbit. But if you use a vehicle like Falcon Heavy, you can actually reserve so much propellant in that second stage that you could do a complete mission and bring the satellite directly to a circular 35,786 kilometer orbit, exactly in the slot, the orbital geostationary slot that it needs to be in. And that can really help extend satellite lifetimes or help them get operational very, very quickly. So those are the reasons you'd use the heavy configurations of the vehicle. And because we don't have a lot of missions that need those specific requirements, that's why you don't see high flight rates of the heavy configurations of the vehicle.
There we go. Thank you, Chris. Let's see here. Flurry, a couple super chat questions. Flurry, do we know why SpaceX delayed the launch? They said they were optimizing it for launch and recovery, so likely a weather issue that they were looking at. It looks like weather was trending in the improving direction at that point, so they opted to push a bit into the window. Right now, everything's tracking on track right now for 12:30 p.m. Eastern time, which is 17:30 UTC. Have to do the math in my head for a second. Rusty Can asking, are they concerned about the Geminids? Is that the
Oh, the meteor shower that's going
meteor
on
shower?
right now.
Yeah. Does
Yeah,
that affect rocket launches at all?
not really. And especially not these satellite ones. The 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 actual percentage odds uh, um, of being hit but change the risk matrix at all for these particular missions. The only thing we have sometimes seen meteor showers affect space flights were during the shuttle era, where the very fragile thermal protection system of the shuttle orbiters, sometimes you saw NASA want to either get a mission down before they reached the peak of a meteor shower out of a profound sense of safety, or just move the launch until afterward. But even shuttle missions went up during the big meteor showers and were on orbit during the big meteor shower. So it wasn't always a concern. So no, there's really nothing in that regard. I mean, the chances of being hit by something like that are so astronomical that it would honestly be a gigantic surprise if something did. Because one thing to remember too is all of these meteor showers, we've never had a satellite be taken out during them.
Right.
And we've never actually firmly been able to trace any impact to a spacecraft. Like when we get them back, like when they come back and land, sometimes the shuttles would come back with gigantic holes in their radiators, and we're like, when did that happen on orbit? But we've never been able to actually trace definitively, to my knowledge, unless there's some obscure one out there that someone in chat knows about, but to my knowledge, we've never been able to directly trace even an impact that didn't harm a satellite. We've never been able to trace it to a meteor shower.
Good deal. And just pointing out what we're looking at on screen now, you can see Falcon 9 vapors around the Falcon 9 rocket starting to form right now as propellant loading continues. We'll see a big vent at T-minus 20 minutes, but fueling is proceeding as scheduled for a launch at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 17:30 UTC. Falcon 9 launching the SXM-7 communication satellite for Sirius XM. Launching a record-breaking mission, the 7th flight of a booster on a paying customer flight. Big milestone for SpaceX happening today. But gonna keep going through some questions as we get through the countdown here. Yep, go ahead.
Yes, indeed. And while you find the next one, I also want to point out both of the payload fairings on this mission were previously used on the Anasis 2 flight of a Falcon 9 earlier this year. As well, this is the first time that payload fairings are being reused on a paying customer mission as well, but not the first time that fairings have been reused overall. So another really positive step toward reuse, because reusing those fairings right there, that is close to $5.5 million that was just saved.
So there we go. All right, more questions here. Aha! Here is a super chat question here from Justin. Thank you so much. Loving all these streams. Thank you. What is the likelihood of SpaceX someday building their own launch complex to cover their whole fleet of rockets? You mean like Boca Chica? That's kind of the idea about South Texas. They have their own launch range that they don't share with other launch providers, and Starship and Super Heavy are at some point supposed to kind of cannibalize the rest of the SpaceX fleet, and that vehicle is supposed to fill all of the roles currently being filled by Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy and then some. They're supposed to make their own vehicles obsolete. So that's kind of the idea behind what they're doing in Boca Chica. Now, Starship is also going to launch from Kennedy Space Center as another launch site, so it's not the sole launch site for that system, but at some point they are going to move towards a range that they kind of own and operate all by themselves, and completing all of their missions from there. That there was at one point plans for Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy to launch from Boca Chica as well, although those plans have kind of diminished. They're kind of focusing on Starship now and letting Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy launch from Florida and California. But that's kind of the idea behind Boca Chica. So in a way, that is a thing that SpaceX is already planning and putting into effect. Good question.
Indeed. Yeah. It'll be interesting too to see a Starship. Starship. Spaceship is a different thing. We have starships and spaceships. Starship. That is one of the interesting things with it. It is supposed to launch from Florida. It does have a launch pad that is under construction inside of 39A, so it would basically just be 39A, just a different stand within that complex. But SpaceX has also talked about launching off of barges in the ocean. So that's another thing to watch for too as the system develops. But they definitely anticipate Brownsville being the place where the crewed interplanetary flights, at least at first, begin to originate from, because it is their private range, and they, if Starship's out here and they want to do a test flight, and I'm only going to use them because they're the only provider. Please do not read this as a slight against them. But if SpaceX is trying to do something with Starship for a Mars window, and ULA comes up and says, well, hey, we have this national security mission for the US government that needs to go on the same day, ULA is going to get priority on that because of the national security element. So using Brownsville removes that element of another provider needing the range assets, right? Which is something that when you share a range like we do here in Florida at the Eastern Range, that you have to accommodate and move around for.
And just really quickly, I saw Michael working on Fleet Cam there, and I just gave a shot. Chris, you've got some puffy little
20-minute
clouds.
vent.
And
Yep.
there's the T-minus 20-minute vent as well, so
There you
fueling
go.
proceeding on schedule.
Yes, but Das, those puffy little clouds that you are seeing are well west of the launch site.
Good.
It is basically crystal clear above the launch pad, and the high altitude cirrus clouds don't really begin until it's going to be quite far away.
I timed that just right.
So yeah,
right on the
weather's
20-minute vent.
Well, at first when you said there are some white puffy clouds, I'm like, is that your way of getting me to talk about the venting of gaseous oxygen?
Let's see, we got some more questions here. Some questions about sort of the future of Kennedy Space Center overall. Is there a future for the vehicle assembly building after SLS? Could you see that building being used for programs other than SLS, Chris?
Honestly, the biggest thing I can think of at this point is if SpaceX wants to rent out the high bays to construct Starships. That's really the only thing I can see at this point, and they don't even seem to be thinking in that direction, considering some of the construction they've had over at the Roberts Road, and of course all the Starship stuff here has been put on pause as they focus on the development work out of Boca Chica. So it's worthwhile to say that this is what the plan was before the work here hit a pause to go to Boca Chica. But the original plan was to construct them, what we were thinking, over at Roberts Road and then transport them on roadways over to 39A. Now, the vehicle assembly building is certainly closer, but Starships also are not meant to roll out on the crawler transporters. And the pad at 39A is not on the crawlerway, so they'd have to go... They'd have to figure out a way, and it's, again, not insurmountable, but if they wanted to use the VAB after SLS, and, well, to be fair, there are actually 3 high bays they could use in the vehicle assembly building right now, because SLS only uses 1 of the 4 stacking bays. Well, technically 2, because they use high bay 4 as a staging ground before picking everything up and moving it into high bay 2 for stacking for SLS. So there are basically two high bays 1 and 2 in the vehicle assembly building that are available right now. And if SpaceX really wanted them, they could have had them for a long time at this point.
Yeah.
Especially High Bay 1, because High Bay 2 was taken by Northrop Grumman for a now defunct rocket, but SpaceX really does not seem to have any desire to be in the vehicle assembly building. Now, that might change because they might be able to work something out with NASA to start stacking and doing some Starship operations there, but it also might just be cheaper to build your own production facility here than to rent out portions of the vehicle assembly building. I hate to say it that way, but it might be more economical to just build their own things from scratch, because this is such a different vehicle than what we've seen before.
And really quickly, y'all, I want to hop on this. I see a ton of people asking if there's something wrong with the rocket. It looks like we have a lot of new
Yes.
space fans here today. What we're seeing right now is absolutely normal. We expect this. At T-minus 20 minutes, look in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. You see where it says T-minus 16, 54, 53. At T-minus 20 minutes, we always expect to see this big T-minus 20 vent. That is a completely normal thing. This doesn't mean that they're detanking. It doesn't mean that they've scrubbed or there's a problem. We see this every single time, and this is an indication that things are going correctly, isn't it, Chris?
Exactly, yes. And to prepare everyone as well, there will be another event like this at the T-minus 2.5 minute mark as well. And that is another further confirmation that everything is proceeding well and to plan. Those are the two big signs that the Falcon 9 gives us that says, yes, I'm happy and drinking up my liquid oxygen and liquid kerosene like we drink coffee in the morning to wake up.
Nice.
Or tea, for those of you who prefer tea over coffee.
Let's see, we've got some more questions here. Here's one about NASA's spaceflight itself. How many people does our organization have? I'm not even sure I know the answer to that question.
Oh boy, I kind of know this off the top of my head. There are basically there are 12 or so of us that provide the regular updates, either from Texas and Boca Chica, or who like Jack handles editing and stuff that goes on in California and Texas and New Mexico, and then I'm here, Chris is in the UK, Thomas, we've got you and Das and Michael all over the country, but there are about 12 of us that are that you routinely hear our names in the public domain, but there are many, many, many others behind the scenes whose names you never hear that make this all work. So 12 names that you've heard, a lot more behind the scenes, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the cool things about being a part of NASA spaceflight. There's so many different people with so many different skill sets. It all just sort of comes together. You've got people that write articles. You've got people that do research. You've got people that are doing commentary here on the streams, video people. Michael programs tons of stuff. We've got photographers that are taking streak shots and those remote cameras that you set near the launch pad that are auto-triggered and that sort of thing. There's just so many different skill sets across a bunch of different people that are required to bring this together.
And on the countdown, we just heard that the SXM-7 satellite is on internal power, so the countdown proceeding.
Did we hear that over the headset? I thought I heard it really quietly, but I did not.
I heard it really quietly in my ear, so it was broadcast to me. I heard it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm working on that. Chat, did y'all hear that call out? I'm trying to make sure that gets piped through, but it's a complicated system of levers and pulleys to get that to y'all.
I believe what they said is spacecraft is on internal power, correct?
Yes.
Yes, so that's a good part of the countdown, right? When you switch the satellite from its ground source power to its onboard batteries, which it will use until it can deploy its solar arrays to start recharging those batteries and grabbing energy from the sun, which I'm currently hiding from in the shadow of my car.
Here is a question about that satellite, and I might actually have to, hold on, I'm going to Google the answers so that I can actually answer the question. The question is, who designed and built these satellites? Chris, do you know?
Oh, Space Systems Loral and Maxar, I believe, built them. Let me go double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's Space Systems Loral.
Yep,
Yeah,
just checked.
that's
Space
correct.
System, Loral, and
There
Maxar.
we go, cool.
So those are the aerospace companies that designed and built this particular satellite. They build lots of communication satellite. Maxar also builds the power and propulsion element for the Lunar Gateway, so that's kind of one of their big flagship programs right now. But
It's funny
Yes.
when that question was asked, my first thought was, I'm pretty sure it's Space Systems, Loral, now Maxar, but it could also be Boeing or Lockheed. And then I laughed at myself and I was like, yes, Chris, those are the three in the
Yeah,
US.
that's all of the. You just named every option.
That's every option, yes. For the U.S., not the world, but for the U.S., yes. Airbus
for
Defense
American
and Space
companies,
does
yeah.
a lot for the European flights as well. Yes.
Yes. Let's see here. A super chat question from Santa Claus. SpaceX is launching so frequently lately. Does anyone know if a launch is scheduled for the evening of December 24th?
Not this year.
As of right now, you're clear, Santa. No launches on the 24th. You're good to go.
Do they have to do like a COLA assessment, the collision avoidance thing?
Yeah,
with
yeah.
engines flying over?
I believe you would call that a SOLA, a Santa avoidance maneuver.
Good deal.
Thank you for the super chat, Santa. Appreciate it. Kevin Rice with a super chat. Thanks for the support. Stefan, your perseverance is truly amazing. Thanks for all the coverage of the past launches. Thank you for the super chat and the kind words. We appreciate
Cheers,
it.
Stefan.
Here's a quick question from Dan. Will Super Heavy belly flop like Starship? No, Super Heavy will kind of fly much like a Falcon 9 booster does. It doesn't have the big aerodynamic control surfaces to do the kind of belly flop maneuver that the Starship vehicle on top does. The Super Heavy is pretty much a very much scaled up Falcon 9 booster, if you can think of it that way.
And you know what? I actually have a follow-up question that I don't think we've asked before. So Elon always talks about the titanium grid fins on the Falcon 9 being
Yes.
the biggest single titanium cast in the world.
Yes.
And starships have to be even bigger.
Right.
Do we know if they're planning to do like a composite of that, like make 2 or 3 separate sections and weld them together? Or are they planning to do a single titanium cast for those? Or are they even titanium? Do we know?
I think you said they're still going to be titanium, though I guess I don't know if they're going to do like the giant single cast or piece or assemble them. I think they're going to be titanium. I don't know if that's been confirmed yet, though.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it was just a question that popped into my head. Figured I'd ask.
That is a good question. Definitely going to pursue that future. Meanwhile, SpaceX's official feeds have come online, and there is a view of just read the instructions out in the Atlantic Ocean, ready to catch a Falcon 9 booster. This booster hopefully landing for the 7th time today. Should be exciting. Because we're coming up on T-minus 10 minutes, so a couple more questions, and then we'll start focusing in on the mission here. Here's a good one from Bill, the super chat question. Have Merlin engines ever shut down during a launch? Yes, they have. On 2 different occasions. The first one was the CRS-1 mission, the first ever operational cargo mission with the Cargo Dragon spacecraft. An in-flight engine failure on the first stage did occur. However, Falcon 9 is designed to withstand that kind of engine failure in flight, and simply the rest of the first stage and the upper stage burned to accommodate that failure, and of course that mission was still completely successful. And then the other time was one of the not super recent Starlink missions. I feel like it was either earlier this year or maybe last year.
It was earlier this year on a Starlink, actually. Yes.
Yeah,
I know. And I feel you on that because this year has been eternity. Yeah.
Right. So on a Starlink mission not too long ago, there was also an in-flight engine failure right before main engine cutoff. But again, it was only one engine, and Falcon 9 is designed with engine out capability. So the mission was still successful despite that failure. And I believe those are the only 2 in-flight failures of a Merlin engine that I know of. So hopefully
that is correct. During a primary mission, yes, that is correct. And it's worth noting that the CRS mission that you noted, Thomas, the primary mission was completed successfully, with Dragon getting to the International Space Station. There was a CubeSat co-passenger on board that could not be brought to its proper movement because the Falcon 9 was supposed to do an orbit change maneuver after dropping Dragon off, and it could not do that because of the extra time that the second stage had to burn to get to for Dragon. But that mission is still classed as a success.
Yeah, just really quickly, I do want to point out something. We do point this out just about every single stream. If you look at the 2 countdown clocks there, you see that SpaceX is 8 minutes and 30 seconds, and ours says 8 minutes and 20 seconds. We have a little bit less delay in our feed because of the way that we pull the SpaceX feed and then add it into ours. So those two things are not ever exactly synchronized. Just be advised, if we do bring up something on the SpaceX feed, it may be not exactly timed the same as ours. But we do try to synchronize our feed here with the countdown clock. It's just bringing that other feed means that you may see things happen and they may not match on both of those feeds if we bring up that SpaceX feed.
Really quick, a question here in chat. Where are you located right now? I'm assuming they're talking to Chris specifically. Chris is on the ITL Causeway, which is a part of the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. How far away from Pad 40 are you right now, Chris?
Yes, I am 5 kilometers or 3 miles away from the launch pad.
That's pretty close.
It is indeed. It's not as close as you can be to a Falcon 9. I believe me, if I could be as close as is safely possible, I would.
And again, pulling a couple extra questions here. We're coming up about T-minus 7 minutes where that stage 1 engine till is about to begin, thermally conditioning the first stage engines for ignition. But we did see a brief view of the drone ship. Of course, we saw just read the instruction. This one saying, of course, I said love you, but both drone ships, do they use Starlink for their video upload link? We have spotted Starlink dishes on both drone ships now. I guess we don't know for sure whether they're using that specifically for video upload link, but I think it's very possible. We do know that both ships are equipped with Starlink antennas to provide some sort of communications links, so yes.
Yes, and this will actually be a good test of that because the vast majority of the drone ship landings this year have been Starlink, NASA crew, and NASA cargo missions, which for those, the drone ships have to be off about 200 kilometers off the coast of the Carolinas, which actually puts them into Starlink's current, like, we can kind of do this at this high latitude, right? But today, they're going to be much, much farther south. So this will be very interesting to see what the live views that we get from just read the instructions are and to go back and compare them, because that might give us an indication of, are they actually using Starlink for the video uplink or not in this regard, based on how stable the signal is.
Yeah.
And I should explain that briefly. The way they're building the Starlink constellation, you get more coverage at the polar latitudes first. And then as you build out the constellation, your coverage slowly starts to come down from the North Pole toward the equator and up from the South Pole toward the equator. So you're basically building from the poles downward or upward to the equator for your coverage. So the northern and southern latitudes get coverage first, and then the middle latitudes, and then the equatorial latitudes.
Good deal. Folks, we're coming up on 5 minutes here. Again, the NASA spaceflight team bringing you some live coverage. This is a live camera from the ITL Causeway over there at the Cape, SXM-7 on the SpaceX Falcon 9, getting ready to go. As always, we appreciate everybody for showing up. I haven't checked in. How many? 2,700 likes, huh? We have 2,729, actually. I just hit refresh. I wonder if we can get that to, I mean, 3,000 is too close. 4,000? 5,000 before lunch? You got 5 minutes. Let's see if we can get that up to 5,000 likes. Also, if you haven't yet... Oh, go ahead. Huh?
How many people are watching right now, Nas?
Just under 15,000 right now.
All right, well, so I don't know why we can't have 15,000 likes. No, I'm just kidding. But
Also, if you haven't yet followed the channel, this is what we do. We tend to be live a lot longer than the official webcasts. Even out there at Starship, we did that marathon stream every single day. So if you're on launch day and you want to ask questions, you want to figure out what's going on, or you just want to be part of a space community, make sure that you follow the channel here, like and subscribe, turn on the notifications. Hey, also follow us on Twitter at NASA Spaceflight if you want to get a little bit of information or notifications whenever things go live. So that's us here at NASA Spaceflight. We've got a merch store as well. If you want to get some cool space merch, we have a couple different t-shirt designs and stuff like that. All of that comes back to the show here so that we can improve things like audio quality, get better cameras, build robots and deploy them all over the place. We turned that around so that we can continue bringing you live coverage. Hey, we're at 4,300 likes. And it keeps coming up, another 700, and you got 3 minutes and 40 seconds to do it, Chad. I believe in you. Whew. Oh, yeah, and the Twitch stream. Oh, yeah, okay, and the people over on my Twitch stream. There you go, Mr. Ed. Sorry. I don't forget about you. I'm talking to you in chat over there, really? Anyways, coming up on 3 minutes before launch here. Chris, are you all good? Do you need anything? I may have... he may have been busy there. I know it gets busy in the minutes before launch. But shortly we'll be going to Chris's camera microphone, which takes us off of what we call real-time audio here on the voice channel, and we'll start bringing his audio off of the camera so we can get that rocket crackle, the amazing rocket noise that we get.
Hey, Chris, I think we have you back. Can you hear us?
Yes, I do. Can you tell me
There
when
we
it is T-minus 2 minutes? I also lost the video preview, but I need to know when to start the remote camera for
Sounds good.
pictures.
It's 2:42 right now, so.
Perfect. Thank you.
And
Alright.
really quick, I can take one quick question before we get into the final bit of the countdown here. Why doesn't SpaceX land Falcon 9 on land at the Cape versus the drone ship? Wouldn't it be cheaper to land on land? It is, and they do so as much as they can. However, for this particular mission, they're going all the way to geostationary transfer orbit, and in order to put enough energy into the payload to reach that orbit, the Falcon 9 needs to use as much fuel as it can. Therefore, they're landing downrange where they use less fuel on Falcon 9 on a drone ship. So that's the difference for this particular mission.
Yeah, good deal. Look, the boss there pointing out we've got
Chris, 2 minutes,
4,600.
Chris, 2
Yeah,
minutes.
that's
Thank
2
you.
minutes,
Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah. And pointing out we've got 4,630 likes, 4,631 now. We've got less than 2 minutes. Can we get over the line for 5,000? Not really worried about that. We're concerned. We want to watch what the rocket's doing here, so that's the last time I'm going to mention it. Unless you don't get over 5,000, and then I'll definitely mention it.
Really quick here, as we come up on 90 seconds to launch, what you're going to see, hopefully, is a successful liftoff of Falcon 9 from Pad 40. After lifting off, Falcon 9 will pitch downrange to obtain horizontal velocity needed to achieve Earth orbit. It'll go through a period of maximum dynamic pressure as it goes supersonic, where the stresses on the vehicle are at their maximum. A couple minutes into flight, we will see the first stage shut down and separate from the upper stage. The upper stage engine will ignite, beginning its journey the rest of the way into orbit. Shortly after that, the fairings will separate, and as we mentioned earlier, both the Falcon 9 first stage and fairings will come down for recovery efforts. Falcon 9 will hopefully land on just read the instructions, and the fairings will make a recovery attempt with go miss tree and go search for the two ships downrange.
And Chris, we are going to your... Yeah, and Chris, we're going to your camera microphone now, so we are off the real time, and we're on your camera microphone. We're going to have an audio delay from Chris, and you just said, Thomas, repeat that, sorry?
I just say they confirmed that Falcon 9 was in startup at T-minus 60 seconds.
Okay, so from here on out, it's Chris Gebhardt out in
And here
the
we go,
field.
T-minus
We've brought
30
up
seconds
his
and counting.
audio.
Go for launch.
And
LD.
T-minus 30 seconds.
It's delayed.
Yeah, got it. And we're bringing that down.
So
All right, here we go. The final 15 seconds of the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7,
No.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of the Falcon 9 on its historic 25th flight of the year, carrying the SXM-7 satellite into geostationary transfer orbit.
Give it just a second for that sound to hit the camera. It takes time for it to go 3 miles. Here it comes.
Falcon 9 pitching down range. Flying straight and true due east from its launch pad at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, the SXM-7 mission underway on board the Falcon 9. The 7th flight of this particular booster, the 25th flight of the Falcon 9 this year, 24th orbital attempt.
You can see the contrail right now, Falcon 9 going...
Falcon 9's contrail condensing in the upper atmosphere like normal. That first stage plume beginning to expand just a little bit there as Falcon 9 is passing out of the dense lower atmosphere of Earth and into the vacuum of space. Falcon 9 continuing to head out due east from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station here. Standing by any moment now for main engine cutoff on that first stage and the staging of the vehicle.
This is a gorgeous track from Chris. A beautiful view from Cape Canaveral right now.
You can still absolutely hear the rumble of those 9 Merlin engines here.
Telemetry is still ticking away.
And I believe that was, no, maybe the camera's having a little bit of trouble focusing.
That was Miko.
All right, and I believe that was booster cutoff, DOS. I'm going to come back onto regular comms now.
Sounds good. We'll get you back on real time.
And meanwhile, upper stage ignition confirmed. The MVAC ignition on the second stage now burning.
On the left-hand side of the official stream there, you can see the grid fins deploying. That is the booster returning down to the drone ship. On the right-hand side of the screen, that is that Merlin vacuum engine. That's the second stage continuing on. You see that camera flip back and forth sometimes on the right because they've got a camera on either side of that engine, and when it changes, that is them switching from one camera to the other there. See.
Yes. Indeed.
Looks like we've got robot mode on Chris there. That's expected sometimes.
Have me back on real-time comms, DOS.
Yeah, here we go. Chris, you were hardcore robot mode. As all the photographers start to upload all of their photos, it messes with the cell signal out there a little bit. Chris, do we have you now?
I think
yes,
so.
You're good. You're good to go.
Okay, I'm not
we've had fairing
from this spot.
confirmed as well.
Yep, and that was fairing separation there. Thank you, Thomas.
Good, good.
So right now, the upper stage is carrying the SXM-7 satellite towards its initial orbit. Meanwhile, the first stage is coasting on a ballistic trajectory towards its entry burn. You can see the grid fins have deployed for that, and you can see some periodic RCS thruster firings. Right now, everything proceeding nominally on this launch so far.
Just checking the skies real quick. Not even, there's just a little bit of a contrail up there. You're not seeing a big pillar of smoke. That's, of course, those engines on Falcon do not create the big pillar like the SRBs on some of the Atlases do.
Sorry, Dust. The contrail is actually above the roof line that you could see there.
Right.
The contrail is actually very prominent in the sky.
Can you get it on the camera?
Yes, actually, I can. I had switched the camera back to your favorite view.
All good. I saw that. Let's see here. So looking a little bit higher in the sky. There we go. Right there on Chris's camera, you can see the remnants of the contrail there.
And I want to show you this too, because you can also see the remnants of all of that initial launch exhaust that has now risen up from the launch pad. As
excellent.
well, yes.
Good deal. That's why it's good for us to have our camera out there so Chris can point us and show stuff like that. Thanks, Chris.
Right? Yeah.
Now 5.5 minutes into flight, everything proceeding nominally. The next milestone will be the stage 1 entry burn, where 3 of the Merlin engines on the first stage reignite to help protect the vehicle during re-entry.
Can actually see some thruster firings there. If you look at the left-hand camera, those are those cold gas thrusters. Before you get to the atmosphere where the grid fins can really start to get a grip on the air, they use those cold gas thrusters to maintain attitude control on the rocket. Then as you get into denser and denser atmosphere, you got more air to flow through those grid fins and you can get a little bit more control. I mean, I'm going to say for free, not really for free, because you got to carry the grid fins, you got to actuate them and control them and all that sort of stuff, but using the air instead of thrusters to maintain attitude.
And you can see just how quickly it's falling now. Here comes the entry burn.
There it is.
There we go.
Yep.
That's a 3-engine landing burn. You can see Falcon 9 slowing itself down as it re-enters the atmosphere, providing some thermal protection for the vehicle as it falls through the dense lower atmosphere. Of note, if this was at night and it was crystal clear, I would be showing this to you on our camera here
Yep.
at the press site, even though this burn is happening over 600 kilometers away from us.
You can see
Absolutely
it
incredible.
it's so high up in the atmosphere there, you can see it from quite a distance away. And like Chris is saying, on clear nights, he can see that all the way downrange. Also, if you're in North Carolina over on the coast, eastern coast of North and South Carolina, not that either of those states has a western coast, but you can actually see the entry burns and potentially the landing burns if you're over there on the coast and it's a clear night.
Yeah.
I'm going to do
So
that
we've
one of
got
these
two-
days.
We really do need to do that, yeah, especially for the Starlink or
Yeah.
crew missions to the station. Coming up right now, we have two things that are going to happen in rapid succession. We're going to have the shutdown of the second stage to enter its initial parking orbit around Earth. And roughly at the same time, the Falcon 9 first stage will be doing its landing burn and landing on Just Read the Instructions. So here's what I always say. It's great to watch the booster land. It's great to cheer that accomplishment. Keep your eye on that second stage engine because that is the entire reason we launched today, is riding on top of that second stage right now.
Yes.
But
So we should-
almost there.
Coming up on the landing burn, but not getting live video yet. Maybe we'll get the drone ship coming online in just a second here. It's just begun its landing burn, but we're not seeing that on the video.
Meanwhile, we have stage 2 shutdown.
There's the
Here we
view from
go.
the drone ship.
Yeah.
Oh, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. That's
Hey, lost the
expected. That's
camera.
expected.
Let's see here.
Wait for it.
That's a big loss. It is difficult to keep that signal going. Ask me how I know. Our robot did the same sort of thing whenever SN8 came down. We had a video drop on it as well. Not often that we get a big blue screen like that.
No, that was a longer loss than normal, but you never
Yeah,
know.
that is correct.
not-
Let's see.
I have not heard them call out landing or Seco or
No.
anything.
Seco 1 was seen on the screen. That's been
Yeah, that's
confirmed.
correct.
No,
There it
right,
is!
But what I'm saying.
Okay,
It might
here we
have
go, y'all.
Oh, there we go. There it is. Woohoo!
Just the big loss of signal. Whew. All right. I beat y'all by a
What I really
second.
don't want him to do is impale the drone ship. Like,
Right, right on the money too. Right in the middle there, making
Look
us
at
sweat a
that.
little bit first.
7th flight of that booster. It'll be back in port in 3 to 4 days to
Yep.
be prepped for another flight.
You'll never guess who will have a live stream of that. Anybody want to wager a guess
gosh. Is it
on
us?
who? Is it NASA Spaceflight? Here on NASA Spaceflight, we've got the fleet cam. We've got one of our robots stationed permanently
So-
at Port Canaveral. So we'll see that come back in. Go ahead.
Just real quick before we talk about fleet cam, don't go anywhere. This mission is not done. The second stage is currently in a coast period right now. So it's out over the North Atlantic. It's arcing downward in its orbit toward the equator, which it will cross over Africa. And it's when it arrives at the equator, it will do a second burn to both change the orbital inclination from 28.45 degrees, because that's where we launched from at our current latitude. So you can't go lower than that on an initial climb to orbit, but you can change your orbital inclination, and it's most efficient to do that at the equator. So that burn will in part change the orbital inclination down as close to zero as possible, while also extending the farthest point in the orbit from Earth's surface up to geostationary orbit, which is 35,786 kilometers. So that burn is upcoming here. Das, I saw we had the timeline of mission events earlier. Do we still by chance have that handy to pop on here?
I believe so. Michael, if you can pop that image on the screen, did that extend all the way out to? It does. There you go.
Perfect. Yeah, so you can see we're in a coast until 26 minutes 47 seconds after liftoff, and then that's about a half-minute long burn of the Merlin vacuum engine on that second stage, and then we'll have payload separation just under 32 minutes after liftoff, at which point it will be mission complete and mission accomplished for the Falcon 9 today.
Yeah, and interestingly, looking at this with a 26-minute second stage engine restart, if I'm not mistaken, that's going to happen on the other side of the planet. Like Chris said, they're
Yes, it
trying
will.
to cross the equator here. And right now, Michael, if we go back to the SpaceX telemetry there, if you look at this, it's going from the Cape and it's sort of going down south. If you looked at it from an overhead map, it would be traveling at a slight southern angle because the Cape is not exactly on the equator. So when you launch, even if you launch exactly to the east, you can't just go in a little halo around the top of the Earth. You have to go around the Earth's center of mass. That's how orbits work. And so what Falcon 9, or what the second stage here, sorry, is doing right now, it's coasting and it's going to cross the equator. This is me reading what I'm seeing here. It's going to cross the equator, it looks like. And then after crossing the equator, it's going to be down south of the equator. It's going to swing down over the southern part of Africa there, go out over the Indian Ocean, starting to swing back up. And on the other side of the planet, when it crosses the equator on the other side, that's when it's going to do that inclination burn to make the trajectory, or to make the orbit at that point flat with the equator. So that's going to be on the ascending node on the other side. Right now it's on the descending node. That just means that it's going from north to south. It's sort of like crossing the equator from the northern hemisphere down to the southern hemisphere.
Sorry, I just want to correct one
Sure.
minor thing you said.
What did I say?
You said it's going to do it on the other side of the planet. It's going to do it when it crosses the equator over Africa here. So it's going to be on the descending node, not the come around node.
So it is the descending node. Okay.
Yeah, it is the descending node. The blue line you see is if nothing changes, this is where your orbit will bring you the next time you come round.
Gotcha.
So it's a prediction of if something doesn't go right, here's where you'll be. And we've seen this on previous SpaceX webcasts, where that line will change after they do another burn. We've seen it most significantly on those Starlink missions where the orbit gets raised a lot, where they don't do an inclination change, they just do a massive perigee or apogee change.
The more I talked, the more I looked at the screen here. I'm like, that's not actually going fast enough for it to be the other side of the Earth. And then I read the math in my head, and it'd be 45 minutes, an orbit normally about roughly 90 minutes, right? And so the more I talked, Chris, thank you for correcting me on that. It's not going to pass here. It's going to do it on the descending node, not the ascending node. Thank you for that. I should have ran the math one more time before I opened my mouth.
and I want to talk a little bit more about that inclination change, because it is really cool. And rockets don't have to do the entire inclination change themselves, right? They can start that process of lowering it down toward the equator, and then the satellites can actually do some of that themselves, because for the Falcon 9 to do all of it at such a low altitude where it is, it would be an incredible energy expenditure. But if it can do part of it as it throws the orbit out to geostationary, it actually makes it more efficient for the satellite to finish the orbital inclination change with its own propellant when it is all the way out there at geostationary distance.
Good deal. So just coasting along here, and this puts us about 12 minutes away from that relight. I think it was 26 minutes on the timeline.
It was just over 26 minutes, yes.
Gotcha. So, Chris, what is your status? Are you going to be able to stay out there on the ITL? Are you having to pack up, or what?
I think I'm going to be able to stay.
Question mark?
I mean, I'm normally able. I mean, I'm normally able to stay. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Good deal. If you could you get me back to my favorite view over there on the launch pad?
Yes, indeed. I will go ahead and zoom on in.
This is tradition, folks. We have to do this. Anytime I'm part of the stream, we have to see my very favorite view on launch day. Chris, setting that up right now. But my favorite thing to see on launch day is this right here. That is SLC-40. The TE, the erector, is still there. The thing that carries the rocket around, helps move it around and stabilize it, is there, but the rocket's gone. So launch day, T plus whatever, I don't see a rocket there. That means that we just got to see a launch, and it's a tradition. It's an NSF tradition at this point, isn't it?
It really is. I like the tradition too, because it is a very, because I have this very big memory of the first time we launched the Falcon Heavy, right? And afterwards standing around and someone said that a launch pad empty is sad, and everyone else in the room went, no, an empty launch pad is good after a launch.
Yeah,
day.
right. Exactly. That is exactly right.
So we definitely had that. Oh yeah, I'm going to be able to stay. They're taking Group 1 out right now.
Okay.
And there's still a whole bunch of photographers plus the broadcast. Well, there are only 2 actual broadcast outlets here today, us and Channel 13 from Central Florida. But yeah, everyone's still here, so we're good to keep going because we're not that far away from the reignition here.
Yeah.
About 10 minutes, if
About 10
I'm looking at
minutes.
the clock correctly. Yeah.
Again, y'all, being accurate is really important to me, and I misspoke earlier. It's not going to pass Africa and do this on the other side of the planet. It's only 10 minutes away at this point, and it's going to do that inclination burn when it crosses the equator over Africa, right, Chris?
Yes, indeed. However, I do want to say I understood exactly what you were meaning there, because anyone who has played Kerbal Space Program, I highly recommend playing Kerbal Space Program. And for the record, no one at NASA Spaceflight or NASA Spaceflight has any stake in that company whatsoever.
I'll
We
play
just
the
love
game.
it.
My name is literally
but
Kate
I
Space
would-
Academy. Like,
Yes, and but I would really recommend it because even in the Kerbal system, right, which is smaller than Earth, right, they make it a little smaller so it's easier to get to orbit, but the physics are the same. And this is what blows my mind about this game. It's a physics game, and you kind of have to learn it yourself as rocket scientists learned it back in the 50s when we were and 40s when we were first starting on this adventure. It really, really does teach you a lot about how rockets work, but specifically, Das, what you were talking about orbital inclination,
right.
Because one of the things you're trying to do on these missions when you launch is get the satellite off the rocket as quickly as you possibly can, right? Whereas in Kerbal Space Program, one thing it will ask you when you want to do an inclination change is it will just say, select the most efficient either ascending node or descending node, right? Are you crossing the equator going in a downward direction toward the southern pole or an upward direction going toward the northern pole? So it will ask you that. So I understood immediately what you were saying. It's about finding the most efficient time in that orbit to do it, except when we're launching to geostationary transfer orbit, we normally just try to do it all in one go, regardless of if it's the most efficient time to do it or not, if that makes sense.
You know what we need to do one of these days, Chris? I need to prepare the mission in Kerbal first, and while we're doing the run-up, I should launch the rocket in Kerbal on the stream, and we could talk about what's going to happen, then we could watch it in real life. Chat, y'all think that's a good idea?
I personally love that idea. Yes, I have actually tried to. It didn't go well because of recording issues, but
yeah,
we've tried this before with a couple of missions. But no, I would love to do these missions and preview them in Kerbal Space. Yeah.
Absolutely. Maybe that's yes. Twitch chat is yelling at me. Y'all, I've streamed on Twitch over 6,000 hours of Kerbal for 5-6 years of my life. Every day I would play Kerbal Space Program on stream for 6, 7, 8 hours a day. What's that? Hang on, let me check it real quick. I think it's like 6,800 hours that the bot over on Twitch has tracked. And Twitch is yelling at me that, yes, you need to play Kerbal again. So at some point, we're going to have to work that out. It's some work to get that done, but I think that would be a really cool thing. I still do museum shows. So previously, early this year, before the COVID sort of shut down travel, I went to the Intrepid Museum in New York City, and I did demonstrations for kids. It was launch a rocket with DOS, and I'd stand up on the stage with the Kerbal on the big screen behind me, and then I'd say, oh, what do we need to go to space? How does a rocket work? We need fuel. We need a place for the astronauts to sit. Like, we'd build a rocket and then launch it into space with the kids at the museum. So if you haven't heard of Kerbal, it's a fantastic way to just gain an understanding of this and have fun while you do it. I put fun in air quotes.
Oh, but it is a lot of fun.
It really is.
You learn all this stuff, and suddenly it really hits you, right? And it really is a good way to understand how this all works. But I love it because you can do the basic Kerbal thing, right, where you're using the original programming, but there's all these modifications that you can add to the game too. So like, I know DOS, you play with the Kerbin system, right, which is smaller and a little bit easier from a gravitational standpoint to deal with than our actual solar system.
Gamified, yeah, it's sort of gamified. It's a little bit smaller planet, same gravity, but a smaller planet in a really unrealistic, like made of unobtainium, condensium, whatever you want to call it. But it's a little bit shorter to get to orbit. It's a little bit more about guest, test, and revise without investing 30 minutes to get into orbit.
But what I also love about it is if you want that absolutely hard thing like we had to do in real life to get all of this stuff, you can put it in real solar system mode with its modifications and play with the real Earth, with the real launch sites like Kennedy and Vandenberg and Brownsville and Mejia and Baikonur and all of them. And you can use real world rockets if you really want to see like, well, why does it take a Falcon 9 so long to get to orbit? Oh, it's because raising that perigee from the center of the Earth, thousands of kilometers below you,
Yep.
and hauling that part of your orbit above the atmosphere takes a lot of energy. That's actually what we see the rocket doing most of its time. It actually throws itself, its trajectory up to its target apogee, the farthest point from Earth in its initial target orbit, very quickly, and then just manages that. But the brunt of the energy is actually going into pulling that perigee out from below the ground and up above the atmosphere.
Yeah, and you can really see it in Kerbal. Like, you can see it happening as the rocket gets going faster and faster, so fast that it actually misses the ground when it falls. So that's it's a really cool way to hang out and sort of learn stuff. Oh, jeez.
And we are about 4 minutes away from the reignition here. You can see it getting close to the equator, and under 9 minutes away from separation of the payload. So things are definitely coming. Things are definitely aligning here.
Yeah, and not sure if we're gonna get video from the second stage. Remember,
We will. We
do
will.
you think
Yeah.
we will over Africa?
Yeah, they always do. They always have it. Yeah.
Good deal. What ground station does it talk to when it's over there in Africa? Because another cool thing is, as it goes around the Earth, they have AOS at different ground stations, right? Okay, now this place on the ground is talking it, and then it's going to hand off to this place. Do you know the name of the one they use?
Yeah, the one that gets called out the most frequently on the western coast of Africa is in Gabon. But then they also have one in the but then there's also a tracking station in the central part of Africa. Thomas, is that the Malindi tracking station, or is that something different? I know we hear the African tracking stations a lot on European launches from South America. I can't remember if Malindi is in the Atlantic or if it's the one in Africa.
I'm not sure off the top of my head, to be completely honest.
Okay, but Malindi raises a like, you've heard of that. I'm not making that up, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
And hey,
Gabon, and then they have one in Central Africa as well.
Chris, just FYI, your camera feed went offline. I think
The
that's
battery
okay.
probably died.
Yeah, not a big deal. That's
Oh,
okay
no.
because we're
Battery's
watching
still up.
this.
Okay.
I don't see the solo at all right now, but probably just clear to pack it up, I think.
Okay, cool. I will start doing that actually. And actually people are starting to pack up. So yeah, let me pack up just so I don't hold anyone else up, but I'll stay on comms while I do that.
Yep.
And we just
sounds good.
confirmed in our back channel, Malindi is in Central Africa, yeah, so.
There we go, Malindi, I got it right. Yay, memory. Man, you know when you're about to say a place and where it is geographically, and suddenly your brain goes, "Oh, don't trust that memory."
Right, yeah. It's
Don't trust it. There we can see it on the timeline coming up. What do they have? SES2 and
yes,
then
that'll be
SECO2.
Yeah, that'll be second engine start 2 and then second engine cut off 2, a pretty short burn, and then there'll be another brief coast phase before they actually deploy SXM-7.
And that call out we just heard was acquisition of signal Gabon. So there it was.
Excellent. Again, y'all, right now, staying live all the way up, I think, until spacecraft separation, which is coming up shortly. Going to do this inclination change here. Since it's going to a geosynchronous orbit, it needs to be in an orbit that follows the equator right around the middle of the Earth, and that allows the satellite to go around the Earth at the same speed that the Earth rotates. That's why we call it geostationary there. That means the satellite's always going to sort of be hovering over one area of the Earth. These communication satellites do that quite often so that they can continuously bounce signals from one ground station down to clients on the ground. And there's that video, just like Chris said, should be getting that second stage coming back online shortly to literally deflect, sort of bend that orbit around and get right even with the equator so that they can deliver this Sirius XM satellite to that slot over on the, what was it, 84 degrees west, 85 degrees west?
84 degrees west, yes.
84 degrees west, where it's going to hover over the eastern United States, question mark?
Yeah, so it'll be above the equator, but it'll be covering the eastern United States and then some South America as well.
There you go. So that's the next thing we should see on the telemetry from SpaceX here. We should see that orbit bend, and that should start to be an orbit that is right even with the equator, almost like the Earth is wearing a belt instead of a sash. I just made that up on the fly.
And there it goes. As ignited.
So we'll see that engine bell heat up again. We said about a minute something burn, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty short burn.
Right.
Although not sure, some of those Starlink missions, the second stage engine wouldn't even like completely start up. It'll like produce a very small amount of thrust and then they'll shut it off already. Like the bell didn't even glow or anything.
Yeah.
But this is a slightly longer burn, but still pretty short.
Oh, come on, SpaceX, give me the side by side with the orbit so we can see the orbit bending.
Shut down.
If I had to guess, it was looking like that telemetry was not updated. Am I missing something
Nominal
there?
orbit insertion.
Nominal orbital insertion confirmed. Yeah, it looks like they just don't have that predicted track up, but
all good.
But
We'll
a
have to do
good
it in
orbit
purple.
insertion, so now there will be a brief coast phase before the satellite itself is actually deployed from the upper stage. But right now, SXM-7 and the upper stage in their correct orbit.
No, the predicted track is up. It's just gone now because of the orbital of that burn. If you go back and watch on the mission control audio feed, you can see it change. But again, that spacecraft separation is scheduled for just after 31 minutes.
Right, it's just about 3 minutes until deploying that satellite, which was the final step towards completing a successful launch. Again, a big thank you to everyone tuning in for today's launch. We're coming up on that last major milestone. And we're just standing by. There's not much to talk about
Yeah.
right
Look at
now.
that, though. You can see the Earth. That's a cutaway, of course, but
Of course, as soon as you mention it.
yeah, you can see the outline of the Earth there, the sunlight hitting it.
And we're chatting in the back channel about the trajectory that we see on the screen right now. Apparently, it doesn't look like the rocket did most of that inclination change like we were talking about. Potentially, it's the satellite that's going to do that big inclination change, because if that trek that they're showing is on the screen is correct, that shows the trajectory going over Madagascar, which is not on the equator. So it might have been that instead of doing the plane change like we talked about, this is just going to boost that satellite up to what's called GTO, the geotransfer orbit, getting the altitude that it needs to get up there to the size of orbit that lets it orbit the Earth in the same amount of time the Earth rotates. But we're not seeing a big change in the inclination there. Maybe just a little change from the rocket, and maybe the satellite does the rest.
And this is a really heavy satellite, so it's going to have to do a lot of the rest of the work to get it the rest of the way.
Well, we can see, if you look at that stage 2 telemetry on the bottom, you can see the altitude is rising. That's because it's now in a very elliptical orbit, where the highest point is close to geostationary altitude, where the operational orbit will be. And as that altitude rises, you can also see the speed decreasing, because that's how orbital mechanics works. The higher you are, the less speed you actually have.
And the component of that, the Kerbal fans over on Twitch pointing out that if you wait until your apoapsis, or your apogee, since this is Earth, to do the inclination change, it actually costs you less delta V because you're going slower up there. So all the Kerbal players over there saying, maybe this is what's going on, and that sort of tracks. Maybe this was not the most efficient place to do that plane change, and you want to wait till you coast. I mean, not maybe. Yes, it would be more efficient if you coast up to Apo. So good deal.
And here comes the spacecraft separation. I always wish that SpaceX put apogee and perigee
Yeah.
I
as
want
part of their telemetry.
I want to see inclination on the screen right now.
Yeah.
Do we normally get that in the press kit? Like, does it say that it'll do this burn for this amount of time?
Usually.
There's spacecraft
Payload
separation.
There's spacecraft
not from
separation.
SpaceX, no.
Yeah, not from SpaceX. Okay, because I
I
know
think
like you.
ULA
Go ahead.
puts out more details usually.
Yeah, we do. SpaceX's looks really nice, but ULA has more actual tactical information on the screen sometimes. But that right there is what we were waiting on, the spacecraft separation as SXM-7, that Sirius radio satellite, is now
You can
free
get
of the upper
you're getting a
stage.
good view of that satellite right now as it kind of drifts away. This is a cool
Yeah.
view.
So that's a successful mission on the 7th flight of a customer, well, a successful customer mission on the 7th flight of a booster, I should say. And again, flight proven payload fairings as well. So reuse looking good for SpaceX right now.
And we won't hear much about that fairing recovery effort for about at least 10 to 15 minutes, just because those fairings take a long time to fall through the atmosphere. They're very light and they slow down a lot quicker. Plus, they then fall down under parachutes. So stay tuned for word from SpaceX on that front.
All right. Should we run through the remaining super chats here just real quick?
Sure.
All right. Chininator says, hey, thanks for all the streams. Get yourself some coffee. Chininator, I do that every morning. I wouldn't be sitting here at the computer talking a mile a minute if I didn't. Appreciate the $9.99. Denver Sky, thanks for the support. Brad, thank you for the membership there. We appreciate it. Carlos Doria says, has SpaceX live streamed every single launch, and is it typical for launchers to do so? I think we see a lot of SpaceX streams, don't we?
Yeah, I think they usually try to stream all of their launches officially.
Okay. I haven't checked to see if it's every single one, but it's definitely a lot of them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm setting up we just lost the SpaceX feed there. We don't actually have that remote from ITO Causeway. That's the last frame I got before it went offline. So that is not a live feed from the Causeway. Fleet Cam is definitely live though.
Hey, Dawes, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, we can hear you, Chris.
Okay, cool. I had to reposition, but I'm good now. The answer to that super chat question that I caught there is yes. SpaceX has broadcast all of their launches. Yes.
Good deal. All right.
And ULA does as well. United Launch Alliance launches from the Cape. Other private companies don't. Like Virgin Orbit didn't Virgin Galactic didn't the other day. Virgin Orbit didn't on their test flight. No idea if Firefly will here coming up from Vandenberg. But yeah, publicly traded companies tend to do that, as well as private companies like SpaceX, who like to broadcast and show what they do to the world.
Yeah, and Chris, we've got really rough connection from you right now. You're going robot pretty often. Just FYI, you may be hitting some signal problems out there. And again, after lunch, people start uploading everything, and then videos start to upload and all those different things. But we are getting pretty tough audio from you right now. But again, y'all, that does bring us to the end of our coverage here, if I'm not mistaken. If I clean that up, it'll look a little bit nicer. But I think we will run through the rest of the super chats. We may have completely lost Chris on comms there because he was going full robot mode. Let me just run through the rest of the super chats, and then I will go ahead and start spooling this down. Someone somewhere, thank you for the membership. We appreciate you. Steve Lionel as well. Polar Monkey 2. Paul is a new member as well. Y'all all appreciate the membership. If you're a membership, there's a couple different perks you get. If you're a fan of Starship, one of those perks is early access to some raw videos. We get these videos out of the field. Mary sends us videos every day, and we'll choose one of them and put them up before they're edited into the full video for members to see. Also, there's a Discord. If you're the top 2 levels of member, you can join into the members Discord as well and chat with like-minded space fans behind the scene. But all the different memberships there, we appreciate you, including this one here. William McDaniel coming in at Capcom level. William, thank you so much for the support. In terms of super chats, got a couple questions, and I'm going to try to hit most of these questions really quickly. Um, Dave, I can handle this one. This one's sort of my domain. Why does the SpaceX website show 1 minute ahead of you in the countdown? That's because of the way that YouTube and streams work. If you ever run into a situation where it looks like SpaceX is way ahead, it means that you've been watching us for longer and your internet connection has caused your stream to fall behind. We have a little bit less overhead than SpaceX proper, so our stream is usually going to be ahead of SpaceX from my camera in the field to your computer if everything's working nominally. So that just means that some internet hiccups as you watched our stream for some amount of time might have slowed you down a little bit. You can always fix that by scrolling the stream back a little bit, our stream here, and then clicking live, and that'll click your stream up to as close to real time as you can get. But it varies based on your internet connection, where you are, that sort of stuff. It's just over time, if your internet connection is not fantastic, your stream can actually fall behind. And since we're live a little bit longer than SpaceX usually, doing the Q&A and commentary with chat and interacting, there is a potential for our stream to sort of get behind if your internet is hiccuping. But good question there. And they'll never exactly match because I have to take a copy of SpaceX's stream and then add a little bit of latency in as I send it onto our server so we can composite it and send it to the rest of the way out. So we'll never get those exactly matched, but you should, if you're seeing us a minute or two behind, that's definitely not nominal. Just click back to live and make sure you're getting the fastest feed. Nick Burnow actually says, how do your guys' robots work? I've built the robots here in my garage, a combination of different cameras and uplinks and antennas and mounting positions and all that sort of stuff. I think at some point we may do like a behind the scenes video or something along those lines, Nick. But they are a lot of fun. There's something that I've built here. I've got like the making of photos and stuff like that. Maybe we'll do like a video explainer or something like that one day. But for now, I'm going to keep it a secret. Not really. It would take me an hour. You'd have me here talking about robots for 2 hours. We don't have 2 hours. Ian Donnelly, I brought this one up on the screen for you. Anyone know how SN9 is looking? I'm not thinking SN9 is perfectly upright yet. I don't know if that's a trick of the camera or not, but it's definitely looking a lot better. I reorganized the camera there so that we could actually see the tip of the nose cone, and it looks like it is flying on the crane right now. So SpaceX continuing to work to recover SN9 from its little tumble against the side of the high bay down there in Boca Chica. Let's see here. Hey, Flurgy, there's another support from Flurgy. Appreciate you. And then a couple questions we'll close out with here, y'all. Of course, this one is two questions in one. So this is from Carrie Saylor saying, what redundancy exists in fairing separation? And then another question, can SpaceX occupy and rebuild one of the several other launch sites at KSC? So Thomas, are you still on with me?
Yep.
What about fairings? Like when the fairing separates, is it a spring? Is it a bolt? Is it like a hydraulic clamp that separates? Do we know?
I know it's not an explosive bolt, which is kind of the common way to do it.
Right?
SpaceX and I think Elon specifically is not a fan of using the explosive bolts just because you can't, once you test the bolt, if it worked, well, that means it exploded and fired, and you can't use that component again. So in order to have components that they could test and then use that exact component on separation, it's some sort of pneumatic device, not a explosive bolt. I don't remember exactly what it is. As far as redundancy goes, I'm not sure there really is. I think the way they make sure that that separates reliably is that testing all of the components prior to flight.
Gotcha. And what do you think about another facility? We know SpaceX already has two launch sites at the Cape, 39A and SLC-40 that we saw today. Do you think they need more room at the Cape?
You know, I'm not saying they wouldn't benefit from having a third pad, that's just even more launch cadence, but I don't think they're having such a problem with their current launch cadence that the demand requires that they get a third site. It is possible that they could, like physically possible, they could do that, but I don't think they have any need or plans to do so.
Gotcha. Again, hey, Carrie, thank you so much for the super chat. I'm just trying to make sure we get to everybody's questions that came through, especially in the super chats there. Ricky Skinner, I am thinking this may be like speech to text because Ricky asked, is there a retro burn to Detroit, the second stage? And I'm going to go ahead and translate that to deorbit the second stage. What's going on with the second stage today, Thomas?
Right, so today's mission went to geostationary transfer orbit, which means it's pretty unlikely that the stage has enough energy to complete a full deorbit burn. Although it's only going to transfer orbit. So they will probably just passivate it by venting any remaining propellants on board, so it's just an empty fuel tank, and this stage will likely not be deorbited, just because it doesn't have the energy to be able to do that. Um, unless they do unless they did save enough propellant to lower its perigee so that it'll reenter, but I don't think they usually do that on their geostationary transfer missions.
Could Jeb get out and push?
If Jeb was on, Jeb could get out and push, but I don't think Jeb was on today.
I'm pretty sure Jeff wasn't on the rocket there. Again, y'all, I think that's one of the things that we don't often get in the press kit. I don't think SpaceX normally says,
Right.
and then at this time it's going to turn around and do a deorbit burn because we saved some fuel. I don't think that's something we normally get, but a good question there, Ricky. Or maybe it was about Detroit. Detroit, you better look up and see if you've got a rocket stage coming down. It'd be a nice show in the sky. That poses no danger to anybody. That's a joke, y'all. And then the last one here, this is going to close out our super chat queue. Durai Karthikeyan says, okay, it's a question. It's a question with a big statement at the beginning of it. The MVAC has two types of patterns on it while it glows, with lines going down it, and another pattern that changes the color of the globe midway down the bell. So talking about what that glow looks like on the bell, and the question is this because of the thickness of the bell? I'm gonna
I
say
would
I
have
don't
to
know.
look at some photos of it or something to try and get a hypothesis. It could be. That's a good hypothesis there. I don't know for sure.
All
I'd
right.
have to look pretty closely at it.
Yeah, we'll see if we can't do a little bit of studying on that one, Durai, and see if we can come up with some hypotheses, hypotheses,
Hypotheses.
ideas on how it works. All right, folks. Well, that is going to get us to the end of the super chat queue. I know that there's tons of questions and stuff like that. There's no way that we can ever get through every single question. There's just so many good questions with so many people that show up and show interest in what's going on. But here at NASA Spaceflight, like we said, the reason we go live a lot longer than the official streams is so that we can answer as many of those questions as we can and just talk to you about the missions and sometimes other space news like SN9 down there at Boca Chica. But we appreciate everybody for showing up today. Tony, SN9 is on the screen right now. You can see that SN9 is a little bit more upright than it was before, but we don't have any official word on how damaged it is or what the future holds for Starship SN9. Hey, I want to say one more thing, y'all. It's a big thing for me that we give accurate information. I started working with NASA Spaceflight because they weren't just a hype machine. You see a lot of places, people that make videos and streams and stuff, and it's a ton of hype and people screaming and so excited. Sometimes the information isn't accurate. So I want to apologize really quickly that bad information I said earlier about it going around to the other side of the planet, that was not accurate, and that's really important to me. So if somebody ever corrects me on the stream, I am never going to be sad about that because that's how you don't learn. Not always going to be exactly right, especially when it's not something SpaceX has provided in the press kit or something like that. But again, apologize for that a little little misspeak where you spoke for 5 minutes about how it was going to do it, Das. Jeez. But that is super important to me. Massive thanks to Chris for doing the correction there. It's going to happen sometimes. I mean, we do talk a lot, and it's really important to me that we get it right. Falcon 9s are not made of steel. That's just because you stared at a starship for too long. But we do appreciate you understanding on that. Always going to make sure that we get that correction in if it happens. Just want to make sure that everybody knows that's personally, that is very, very important to me that we have accurate information. So, anyways, Thomas, I think
Yes.
we've talked enough, huh?
I think we have, and I think 10 straight days of live streams now. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I don't know if we'll be live at some point tomorrow, but if the recent trends hold, something will come up. So feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed. We'll always be live for major launches and things from Boca Chica. We have daily videos from Boca Chica as well as some other interspersed uploaded videos. Sometimes we upload things that we record with FleetCam and things like that. So if you're a fan of the spaceflight news content, feel free to subscribe. And thanks for tuning in today. Yeah.
No, Chris says there's an SN10 launched live stream tomorrow. No, there's not.
Well,
No.
I just want to say, this is Chris Gephardt. I
Hey,
just wanted
Chris.
to say too that even if we do not have a live stream tomorrow, which we might not, hopefully we get that day off. do pay attention to our regular news site, nasaspaceflight.com, because Russia is launching the Angara 5 on its second of 2 planned test missions tomorrow, just before 1 a.m. Eastern time in the U.S., just before 6 o'clock UTC tomorrow. So that's a big test flight coming up. There will not be a live stream of that, but do pay attention to our site for news on how that went and what the Angara rocket is for the future of Russia's space program.
All right, good deal. Y'all, the voice you hear there, that's Chris Gebhardt, Assistant Managing Editor for NASA Spaceflight. He was out there in the field crewing that camera from the ITL Causeway. Give a round of applause for Chris bringing us those beautiful live feeds. Well, I'm going to keep saying this, well in advance of when we get the official feeds. SpaceX has some nice cameras. I'm not going to lie. It's hard for us to compete with SpaceX, who can literally strap cameras to the rocket. But we love to bring those fantastic views from where we can be over there on the ITL Causeway, and while we enjoy them, answer y'all's questions. So, Chris, thank you so much for rolling out today and making that possible.
My pleasure.
Okay. Also, back in the studio, doing a fantastic job with the questions, Thomas Berghardt. Thomas, as always, it is.
We're back, Thomas.
Oh, wait, what? Yes, go back to Thomas again. Yeah, wait.
Michael was like, "Oh yeah, all right, they're gonna thank me, cool," and then does his Thomas again.
I think it is Thomas, whatever. Thomas, thank you so much as always. I cannot express how easy you make my life when I'm able to focus on something technical and you just take it away with the super chats and questions.
Of course, happy to.
See, I wanted to thank Thomas again, is what it was. Michael, we won't forget you. Controlling the fleet cam there right now is Michael Baylor.
Yeah.
Oh, that cargo ship that blocked our shot.
I was panning over to show the cargo ship that I'm currently raging at. We cannot see the pad like we normally could, so I had to guess where the rocket would be, and I guessed wrong. And when you're manually tracking a rocket on a robotic camera with a 1-second latency, if you screw up something and try to have to re-find the rocket again, you're kind of in trouble. So that's why DOS did not show much fleet cam today. It's because the cargo ship blocked our view, and it took me too long to reacquire the rocket. But anyway, I wanted to quickly say thank you to Declan for Flight Club for the help with the telemetry. That was one thing that did work today. We successfully matched the liftoff time with his telemetry. So thank you so much, Declan, for that. And Declan's also helping with the auto track script that we're working on to automatically track the rocket from Fleet Camp. The plan today was to have me manually track the rocket and gather position data of where I was pointing the camera so I could compare it to our automated tracking system and see how well that would have gone. But of course, that did not happen because of a cargo ship.
Good deal. Yeah, like Michael's saying here, you'll never guess where Pad 40 is. You see the huge cargo ship, and then you see the even huger back part of the cargo ship, the tower where they control the cargo ship from, the superstructure. I've never worked on a cargo ship, not exactly sure what part that is, like how to name it. But Pad 40 is right behind that massive part of the cargo ship, making it very difficult to see the rocket as it on the pad and track it after liftoff until it clears the cargo ship. Then you got it correct. But Michael,
it was the very top of that cargo ship that the rocket came out behind.
Oh, jeez.
I gambled on it being just to the right of the highest part, and no, it was the highest part.
Again, y'all, Michael, fantastic job crewing the robotic camera on Fleet Cam. Hey, speaking of Fleet Cam real quick, y'all, I know the live stream is ending. I know a lot of y'all come for the commentary, reading a magazine, but if you want to keep hanging out with cool space fans, like-minded people, Fleet Cam stays live 24/7. It's been streaming live since October 19th. I'm going to have to change the title away from Alpha at some point.
You say that every stream, but...
I do.
Yeah, and then you never do it.
I'll change it after the stream. Of course, Fleet Cam is brought to you by Rusty's Seafood and Oyster Bar over there. They let us literally strap a camera to the side of a post outside the restaurant, and that's how we get those fantastic views of Port Canaveral, especially in a couple days when that booster that landed on the drone ship comes back in. But I think we've talked enough. Probably time for us to end the stream. John Galloway for NASA Spaceflight here, y'all, saying thank you so much for joining us. Hope you have a blast. And we are going to go ahead and shut down our live commentary stream. Join us over on Fleet Cam. You want to keep hanging out. Maybe I'll put up that robotic camera from Boca Chica over on Fleet Cam too if you want to keep an eye on SN9. But NASA Spaceflight now, signing off. Thanks for watching. Later, nerds.
pressure looks good.
Following up.
Roger, roll, Atlantic. Flight downside speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.